songs and this direction here.
This guy always. Joe Hollywood, you know how we do.
Joe Hollywood.
Yeah, messed that all up. Anyway,
As
how's
always.
everybody doing? Good to see you. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
Yep. And so today we're talking about some interesting, hopefully not too controversial, but probably will be stuff about trans issues. And so we talk about a lot of different stuff on this show. We try to keep up with stuff that's going to be that's in the media or is evergreen, meaning you guys can watch it anytime. But this is one of those issues that seems to keep coming up, and especially within this last month, a lot of things as it relates to trans stuff, pronouns of things, and just other video content creators have created stuff that kind of talk about these issues, and people have a wide variety of feelings and opinions about it. So we're going to get into that. And actually, you brought this to my attention, Joe. So what made you bring this stuff to my attention?
Oh, don't bring me here. Don't bring me here.
About it, but it's something like that. Like I definitely was like, I wasn't sure if we were going to do a show about it. And you were kind of like, we should probably do a show about it.
Definitely do a show about it. Yeah, no, it keeps coming up. It keeps hitting the timeline, and I keep seeing it come up over and over again. I don't know if this is when I first was made aware, but I know Joe Rogan was facing some heat a while back over his comments about the UFC and just the whole thing of trans athletes, particularly trans women participating in women's sports. And it hasn't gone away. The topic keeps coming back up. There's different rules being written and governing bodies trying to figure this whole thing out. And it's really kind of becoming a thing. And as of lately, there's a couple things that happened. So we had Caitlyn Jenner spoke up, which was interesting to me, where Caitlyn was like, yeah, I don't think this should be a thing. I don't think it's fair. And the funny part was she kind of got lashed out at, like, how dare you have this opinion? How dare you not agree with this?
How dare you, as a trans woman, have an opinion about trans women in sports?
Because what really bugged me out was Sarah Silverman said that same thing. Basically, Sarah Silverman literally was like, who are you to even have an opinion on the topic? Why do you get to speak about this? And I'm like, this former Olympic athlete, or even former, this Olympic athlete, medalist,
yes,
who is now a trans woman, doesn't have an opinion on trans women in sports. Like, this is probably the most qualified person on the planet to speak on the topic, but you're mad that they don't have the same opinion that you do. Therefore, we need to cancel. I mean, like, one woman of the year. Like, how do you not get to speak on behalf of women's sports, athletics, just because we don't have the right opinion? So it's just kind of a trip to me how, like, you just have to be on team. You just have to be on message. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. Just if you don't say what we want you to say, then you're wrong and should shut up.
And it's interesting because that's where it gets to the level of, like, let's say, we're obviously not living the experienced life of trans people. So I could, on an intellectual level, understand if a person in that situation be like, hey, you guys as straight men, you can't have a say in how you feel about these things, even though we're going to express our opinions in this show. But to then be like, oh, but here's a trans person, and oh, wait, they disagree with our main agenda, therefore they're also out too. Like, that's where it gets kind of
more so though. There's another video that I saw where it's been a few of them actually, where there's trans people that are like, yo, this is going too far. Guys, we should really ease up on some of this. Trying to cancel everybody thing is not really helping our cause. And they get shut down. They get ostracized. And so they're sitting there coming out now like, look, this is getting bad, where nobody can say anything that's off brand or off message, because then you get shut down. It's literally just about the message. Doesn't matter who you are, how you feel, how much it affects you. It's just everybody needs to say what we want you to say, or we're going to bring the full force of social media and just stigmatism and just call you every horrible name under the book and try to get you shut down. And it seems like it's not, a big deal. Like, oh, you got shut down on social media, but this is people's livelihood. Like, Joe Rogan survives from his show. He makes his money. That's his job. You're threatening this man's job for having an opinion. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's crazy to me. Like, okay, your job is to state your opinion, and we don't like your opinion, so we want you not to be able to say your opinion anymore.
Right. And speaking of opinion, obviously we'll go into a lot, and there's a video that we're going to show you guys that we're going to react to, that kind of, this lady is talking about defining, like, or wanting to either change pronouns or take away the definition of what it means to be a trans man versus an actual man, yada yada yada. So one of the big opinions that people have about that is whether or not a trans man is actually a real man and a trans female is actually a real female. Like, they like to say, like, well, if you are, therefore you are. What is your opinion about that?
Oh, see, now you're gonna get me canceled.
Well, I'm gonna give my opinion too. Don't get twisted. Just I'm just
No,
asking.
I'm saying. Well, this is a part where I'm kind of like, it's touchy. And I say that because there's a difference between respecting how somebody chooses to live their life and then making statements of fact that don't line up with facts, like trying to change nature and biology and science and all the rest of that. And I say it's touchy because a lot of people who are very vocally voicing these opinions are on the far other side of it and do have opinions that come across sounding kind of hateful. So you kind of don't want to team up with that side of things because it's a little too aggressive. But at the same time, you don't want to like abandon your logical reasoning altogether and just jump on teams so people don't hate you. So you kind of in this like weird place in the middle of like, okay, how do you make it make sense? So I mean, the thing that makes the most sense to me is, yeah, biology is biology. And I'm like, well, there are rare exceptions which people try to lean into to make their argument.
Yeah.
For the most part, we're dealing with like X and Y chromosomes, and that's the thing. Like you can't just delete the fact that that exists. We're dealing with reproductive abilities, and that's the thing. And you can't really just delete that. You know, we can just call it what we want to call it and change the nature of words. But you run into the danger of, okay, at what point do words just not mean anything?
Right.
So it's like, it shouldn't be an attack on your humanity to state, to just state what appears to be, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
if it comes from a place of someone's in danger because of it, I get that. But we're going to the point of just, I don't want you to call me this thing. And if you call me this thing, it's hateful and I feel attacked. I'm like, that's a strong word to put on like something to that level. And I'm like, I can see how you may feel attacked, but that's something you got to work out. You know what I'm saying?
But even that too, of like, you know, even if a person's saying, hey, I want you to call me as such, and you're like, okay, I will, but I don't believe it. No, you got to believe it too. Why? Like, if you're saying that you as a man now feel like you are a female, so you're now a trans female, then I can, if you want me to use some certain pronouns, if you want me to call you whatever, if you want me to treat you as a woman, that is totally fine. But to say I also have to believe that thing fully, that's not going to happen, you know?
And the other side to that too is that the rules don't apply universally. So if that's the case, because like it's to the point where people are getting shut down and canceled for not wanting to date someone, right? So like,
I've had the discussion with female friends of mine that were like, "Hey, well, you know," I'd be like, "I don't want to go for a trans female." Well, why wouldn't you? There's a lot of reasons. Hypothetically, if I wanted to have kids, can't get them pregnant. I mean, I can adopt, but it's not going to be my lineage. They might still have their parts down there. I don't want to deal with male parts in the bedroom. So to say that I'm now hateful because I don't want to deal with these various things, on top of they still got technically usually a man's body, muscular strength, they still got the hair, possibly, like I don't want to deal with those things when I'm with a partner.
And you don't get to have that preference because that's misogynistic and patriarchy. However, someone else in that realm can have whatever preference they want. Like no one's going to tell a woman you have to sleep with any man that approaches you. That's not going to be a conversation that we ever have. You can't decide you don't want to sleep with this person because of any reason. Like that's the most discriminatory thing that we as humans have accepted, where you get to decide who you want to. That's where the whole concept of rape exists. It's like, this is somebody I don't want to have a sexual interaction with, and I can choose to not to, and you can't force that upon me. However, if the person's trans, then you don't get to have that choice if you're a man, because you're a part of the patriarchy. So you're being hateful for not wanting to have sex with someone who wants to have sex with you if you're a man and they're trans. But any other category, it's fine. Yeah. And that's where it gets to like, that's crazy to me. Like, so one of the arguments that I hear a lot too is the whole thing of what your appearance is. And this is where we get into some of the other stuff of the non-binary and gender roles, gender definitions, and all the rest of that. And so a lot of the traditional minded people are saying, like, if I look at you, what I see is a perception of a human being, and it's typically going to fall under male or female. And there's people who either want to dress as one or the other, but certain key characteristics don't quite match up. That tells me, okay, this person is a female dressed like a male or a male dressed like a female. While once again, there are people who genuinely can switch and cross and you can't tell and all this kind of stuff. There are some rare exceptions like that. In a lot of the cases, you can kind of use the visuals to see, okay, this is what's going on here, this is what's going on there. And so they're like, regardless of what your mind tells you, what your eyes tell you, you have to call me what I say I am.
Mhm.
So once again, can that apply in other areas? So I always go to the thing, okay, can I say I'm not a black man? Can I say I'm not black?
You can say it.
Can I say I'm not my age? You see what I'm saying? It's like, well, those things are ridiculous. Okay, well, there are people who can. There's passable people. There's, like people who are
Rachel
light enough. Or
years ago with when she was trying to pass, she passed with flying colors as a black woman because she was
yeah,
out.
it happens, but it's rare. And then when it comes out, it's like, oh my gosh, such an outrage. How could you lie to everybody? But that doesn't apply here. And once again, it's to the point where it's like, okay, if you genuinely feel like you're not living the life you should live and you want to live a certain way, honestly, okay, go live your life. My whole thing is, why do you have to force everybody else to agree with it?
Right.
And the excuse I can get with is it's dangerous. It's dangerous to live like this. People get upset and take it too far and they get violent. I get that.
Yeah.
There be protections to keep that from happening? Absolutely. But then to make like laws determining speech, it's like it's over-regulation for something that could potentially cause something over here.
Right.
That's the part where that's why it's such a big fight. If it was just at the level of I don't want to be harmed because I feel like putting a dress on, okay, absolutely. I don't see people not agreeing with that. No one should beat you up because you have a dress on. No problem.
Yeah.
No one should beat you up because of your sexuality. No problem. Absolutely. We will back that all day. It's okay, but now I don't want you to even have the thought that I'm not what I say I am.
Right.
Or it can be illegal. That's a little too far. I don't want to mistakenly say the wrong pronoun to somebody and be like, oh, that's a hate crime. You're going to jail. But you dressed like a dude today.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you still wanted to be called she because today, like I met RuPaul. I don't know
really, I know that.
Pronouns personally. I don't not like met, but like interacted with. We ain't like But at a job I was working, RuPaul approached, had a brief conversation. But it wasn't the RuPaul from Drag Race. It wasn't the hair, makeup, dress. It was the t-shirt, jeans, bald head. I didn't know who it was till I saw the ID, and I was like, "Yo, oh, this is really okay." Now in that scenario, my instinct is, "Dude, what's up?" Even though I know, okay, half the time you want to dress like a woman, I still don't know what your pronouns are.
Yeah.
So at what point can you wear like a label or a badge? Or like when you approach, say, look, I'm this, call me this, and that. I see it in social media now. People will have their pronouns in their title.
Yeah. They're showing that they're allies with the trans community by doing that, which is, it's a good thing. But I do wonder, like, at what point, because I mean, like Demi Lovato just came out and said she wants to be called like them and they. And I was reading the article and trying to read up like blah blah blah, and then they said that this is that, and then them was this. And like this is now messing up sentence structure on top of like against the whole thing of like, even though she's trying to do that, she's realistically they are realistically going to still be treated as a woman in society. She's still going to get the benefits that women get, even if she doesn't want to identify as that completely. She's still going to get those benefits. If I try to do that, I'm going to still get treated like a black man in America, and it ain't going to be the same treatment.
That's honestly a social experiment I'm curious about. You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna be real with you. I don't see me doing this in real life, but
okay.
I do have a thought experiment where I would want to see, could I pull this off? Could I decide that I am a woman?
A white woman.
Keep in mind, I am 6'3", over 300 pounds. I'm a big dude, like big dude. So could I realistically go out into the world? And then people are like, oh, well, if you cross dress, so I got to shave my beard off. I still don't think anybody's going to believe, no matter how much effort I put into it.
Yes.
According to the rules, I shouldn't have to, right? Because it's how I feel on the inside. So if I genuinely decide I feel like that I'm a female.
Yes.
But I want to keep my facial hair. I want to dress. Let's say I decided I wanted to be a lesbian who is gender non-binary. Mm-hmm. So I wear t-shirts and sweats all day. I'm still attracted to women. I'm non-transitioning so I don't have to cut anything off and go through any surgeries, right? These are all the words that are out there.
Yes.
Can you argue with it?
Still.
Like, how do you get to decide? Who are you to tell me? How dare you assume my gender?
Yeah.
And I'm over here like, would this really fly? I'm genuinely curious. Like,
now, to be completely fair, because what the trans people say is that it's not just a thing of like you just up one day decide to do something. It's like they have to go through psychological tests that show they've always identified this particular way. They have to usually like dress so much this and that. But like, yeah.
Since when has that been a thing? I've never seen there has to be psychological tests and all the rest of this. There may be for the children, for kids who want to transition. But what test did Demi Lovato go through? What test did Elliot Page go through?
That's trans. Again, she's non-binary, so she's still
okay. Elliot Page.
Yeah.
Elliot Page. Caitlyn Jenner. Did Caitlyn go through tests? Woman of the Year. Was there a whole psychological breakdown? How is that not discriminatory?
I want it to be different for celebrities than for everyday people. That might be a thing also.
Because I'm over here like, let's say that was the case. Where like I decided I wanted to be female. Like I don't identify with certain male stereotypes and male traits, so I'm just not a male anymore. So cool, that's what it is. Can I now apply to Spelman and get a scholarship? See what I'm saying? Like, to what qualifications do I have to have? Because I'm like, I could join the sports team, right? But do I have to dress cross or look like? Do I have to have gone through transitional surgeries? Do I have to be taking hormones? That's what they're trying to figure out. That's what the laws and the sports authorities are trying to work out. To what level do we allow this to make it fair? And people are mad that they're even asking those questions. But I'm like, how do you govern it if you don't? Is really the question.
Yeah. And I think about that in a sense, because I thought about this morning about, to your point, how far does that go? Because if we're going to say, for example, okay, trans women are women, and therefore you have to treat them as women. Does that go the opposite way? If I'm a female now, can we'll say born female now also identify as a trans female? And I ask that because, I'm here in Hollywood, and I do a lot of.
Don't get in trouble. Don't get in trouble.
No. What I'm saying is, I do a lot of. I go for parts for like casting stuff like that. So I'll go to backstage.com and look up things that I can audition for, and I see a lot of auditions now that will say we're specifically looking for trans men and trans women to take up these various parts. But if we're saying that trans females are actual females, shouldn't females that were born female be able to go for those parts as well?
Interesting.
Also, think about like workplaces that are saying we want to diversify our platform, we want to have more women in the conference room. You could realistically have like a group of 10 people in the conference room, 6 of them are guys, 4 of them are trans women. They are now women. They're taking up those spots. I refuse to believe that women would not be up in arms about that.
Up in arms. But which women get the priority? The natural born women or the trans women? Because
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying in those spaces, the trans women get those parts that they're saying trans women are women. They're not former men. Therefore, it's not a room of 10 guys. It's a room of 6 born males and then 4 trans women. But I've noticed a lot of times there's hypocrisy, especially in that term where it's like, especially on the women's side of things, where it's like, oh, like it's all great until they start losing Women of the Year, until they start losing various medals, until they start losing these things that traditionally born women typically had. Then they want to have the thing of like, oh, well, I mean, trans women are women, but still there needs to, what? Are you saying they're not women now? Because they're not born women. It's not bad to have the title of trans woman on there, because that can actually be very useful in terms of advocacy, in terms of, like I said, parts that are coming up in Hollywood or other various things where they're looking for that particular title on you to be able to hire you for stuff.
But it's also a lot of negativity that comes with it still. There's still a lot of stereotypes. There's still a lot of dangers, which is why there's this push. Like, I get it that, okay, it started off as something that was on the outskirts so that it was shunned and even attracted violence. So the push is to normalize it, to counter that. The thing is, so this push is equally going as far to the other side. And the concept is, okay, if it started way over here and you push it way over here, it should snap to the middle to balance. I'm just not seeing that we're trying to go to balance at this point. I see that we're trying to actually push it way over to the other side and pin it there, which is like, okay, it's a little far. It's just a little much. And that's why I feel like a lot of society is kind of pushing back at this point. Like, okay, we don't we don't want to say it needs to stay this negative energy around it, but we don't want it to flip to where the negative energy is now on somebody who doesn't want to participate either.
Mm.
Because at some point, if a lot of the agenda that's being pushed goes through, it really will be a disadvantage to be not participating, if that makes sense. So it's like, I really am not a fan of this word, but if you're cisgendered, you'd be at a disadvantage in most situations because you're not in the, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So then that's where that case that you were talking about, where like, okay, women going for a part, but they're looking for a trans woman, she'd be at disadvantage. So, okay, if it's all based on how I feel on the inside, I was born a woman, but I feel more like I'm a trans woman, so I'm a trans woman. How can you say I'm not?
Or I'm a female that feels more like a man, but I want to go back to feel like I'm a female that feels like a man that feels like a female.
Like however you want to phrase it and play the game, like it comes down to word games.
Yeah.
And I remember having a discussion, it was on another topic, but I was having a discussion with somebody and I was kind of going over the definition of the two things we're talking about, and they were like, oh, that's just semantics. That was the most dangerous dismissal I'd ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
Because as soon as he said that, it was like, so you're saying what words mean doesn't matter.
Right.
Meanings of words are meaningless. If that's the case, we can't have a conversation because we're using words which don't mean anything. Like, we can't talk anymore. And I already kind of feel like that. This is getting off topic. This is my own personal rant.
Yeah, no, I get you though.
But
yeah, because it's like, yeah.
I already feel like we're in that place where words don't mean what they need to mean. Like, I feel like we're in a society where people lie to each other so much. It's common, and you're supposed to just understand what the lies mean. And that frustrates me. It frustrates me to no end. There's a Lil Wayne quote, and I hate that I have to quote Lil Wayne, but he's one of the intellectuals of our society these days.
Surprisingly, yes.
Lil Wayne said, I speak the truth, but I guess that's a foreign language to y'all. That's like my quote right now, because that's how I feel in my everyday life, that when I speak the truth, people have to figure out what I really meant.
And it's at the detriment of, like, if you're speaking directly, it's like people don't even want to believe the direct word you're saying because they're so used to it must mean something else. There must be a different agenda behind what he's actually saying. It's like, no, this is literally what I meant. I said what I meant.
So it's like a simple one. I was meeting a friend and I was like, hey, I'm on my way. And they said, oh, well, I know what that really means. That means that you're still at the house. You're going to leave in 10 minutes. Okay, no. Here is a picture of me at the stoplight in my car on the way. Like, I use the words that mean what they mean. Yeah. But we're so used to people not doing that. Oh, I'm running late. Let me lie and say I'm already on the road, even though I'm just getting in the shower. So they don't get mad at me. Like, it's become so prevalent and we're just so used to it that we just don't speak the truth anymore. And it's frustrating because even if you do, nobody believes you. And then if you don't, it's like, okay, how do I say what I mean? Like, okay, what words mean I'm actually in the car on the way? Do I have to say I'm outside parking to tell you that I'm in the car? Like, I don't know how far to lie to tell the truth.
Right. Well, I think everybody's so used to creating their own realities now that it's like, you know, like I said, your reality of I'm going to say the things I mean and be on time to do these things. Their reality is that's not going to be a thing. Men don't do that. Men aren't going to be a certain way or whatever. And that's a whole different topic altogether. But like, yeah, so
that's honestly a part of where that whole like train of thought came from. Because if I'm being honest, I honestly don't fit a lot of the mentality people have that men have. Like, oh, men act like this, men are like that, men are dogs, men are blah blah blah. I don't identify with most of the stereotypes of men or what people call alpha men. Yeah. And I'm like, the more you research it, that's not really a thing. But a lot of women have bought into the concept. So I feel like this relates to a certain extent. In a culture where the patriarchy is bad and men are kind of inherently wrong, then we start to shape the minds of men that acting masculine is wrong. So then you have an inflation of men not wanting to be masculine. You have influences from society, from parents, from everywhere saying, be more feminine, essentially, because masculine things are wrong.
And it's like all these things that, and to be fair, because like those things are considered more feminine energy. And I know there's like a thing of like, you know, why is it that things that are female are so bad? And it's not that it's even bad. It's just that for our lived experience, when we do those things, we don't get many rewards for it. In fact, a lot of times we get chastised for it. And that's the thing that needs to change. But in the meantime, realistically, You know, if I'm at a movie at a chick flick and I'm crying, a woman's gonna look at me some kind of way about that.
So full disclosure, I cry in movies.
I know.
I'm a big dude. I cry in movies. And my friends make fun of me all the time for it, especially my female friends. So
I've never made fun of you, Joe. I'm just like, oh, that really got to him. Because I cried at Toy Story 3. I cried at the end of Titanic. I cried at the end of Forrest Gump. Like I have no say in anything you're doing. So
what I'm saying is you're trying to portray yourself as a masculine man. You can't be crying at movies. So then it's like that's weird. You're now an enigma. You're now not in the category of alpha male because you cried at a movie. Regardless of why you cried at a movie, that might have touched some personal issue for you. That might have been something you dealt with. You might be working out your traumas, but all they seen is this dude is crying. That's not masculine. It's a turnoff. But according to society, that should be a positive, right? You're a male that's in touch with your emotions. Ain't that what y'all taught us to be when we was growing up? But it's bad now. All right, that works. It's just this whole thing of what's the right way to live. And you kind of got to work it out. But the answer is there's no real answer. Like there's no approved this works kind of thing anymore, especially for dudes. So you kind of start looking at it like, okay, you either have to be hyper masculine, almost to the point where you're in this toxic area that you're not supposed to be in to attract straight women. But you have women who have figured out, oh, if I'm masculine enough, I can attract women. That's where you have the whole butch lesbian side of things. Yeah. And I say that from a place of I've had a lot of friends and been around a lot of people where I've seen they're pretty successful. Like they got the game down because all the places where men are scared to be men, they'll step up and do it without question. And women are attracted to that energy. Yeah. So they'll actually win over the straight woman from the dude who was scared to go that far. And you like, okay, something's off here. So like,
got the stereotypically guys swag down and the look down and the pants sagging and the haircut. And it's like, for all the talk of like, oh, you know, this whole female, male, it shouldn't matter. This is that. The reality is, again, because these are women that are now going after other women. So these same women that are like, oh, be more emotional, this is that. They're going for these women that are none of that. And you would think if a woman's wanting all that stuff, she would go for a woman that is more emotional, more caring, more X, Y, and Z. And that's not typically the case. And that goes to there having to be a polarity of feminine energy and masculine energy in a relationship, whether it's lesbian relationships, gay relationships, etc. Because most gay dudes don't want a guy that's overtly feminine either, if they're going for a guy. So it's like
they want to be that.
Yeah.
Like it depends on which role they want to play. Like even in the non-gender conforming parts of society, they're conforming to gender roles.
Yeah, and that's where they're defining themselves by the gender roles they're trying not to do.
Somebody fits one part or the other. And it's just kind of like, that's just kind of the balance of relationships. Somebody's the masculine, somebody's the feminine. It doesn't have to be male and female, but that kind of tends to be what you see happen. Now, right or wrong is not what I'm here to have the conversation about. What I'm having the conversation is that's just what we see happen. So if it's two men, one tends to be the more feminine acting and one tends to be the more masculine acting. The same thing with women. The whole thing, studs and femmes and all the rest of this is like, why does it need to exist if it doesn't matter?
And I think it takes away from recognizing that both of those energies are needed in a relationship regardless. Because you can't have two people that are just middle of the road. We're not male and female, we're just both these things. Because just like even in like male and female relationships, like we'll say traditional cisgendered female and male relationships, that if both people are, we'll say for semantics sake, alpha, if both people are alpha, it doesn't typically work out. If both people are beta, it doesn't typically work out.
Fight. If they're both alpha, they're at each other's throats all day.
Yeah.
One has to submit to the other. And traditionally speaking, when you research and see how couples work, typically if the man is submitting to the woman's unhappy.
Yep.
Unhappy. That's the nature of relationship.
Things. Downing him for if he's not the one earning more
money
or being the leader of the relationship. Like I tell guys all the time, I said as much as women are saying they want you to like ask them questions about they want yada yada yada, women don't want to lead a relationship. They just don't. I've had women tell me straight up, hey, I want you to make the decisions. Like I want you to be the one to decide where we're going to go. I don't want to have to do anything with it. I work all day. I do enough deciding it at work.
They want you to make decisions with considering them. They want you to figure out what they want and make that decision for them.
Yes.
And it sounds confusing, but it's actually not that hard when you understand what it is. It just took a minute to get it. But it's just like, I don't want somebody to just make all my decisions. I want somebody who understands me enough to consider the things I like and then help me to get where I want to go. And you're like, okay, that takes time.
Yes.
But the issue I see is a lot of times women want that like from day one. It's like, okay, give me a minute to learn you before you just think I'm gonna just know everything you want. But at the same time, there's dudes that figure out, okay, this is the gist of what women want.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
Again,
okay,
they'll all say that we're all different, but there are just like they'll say that they're all different, then they'll say that all men are like this. It's like, no, we both on both genders, well, both genders have similarities in how they function. So a lot of men like the similar things. Like most men like no arguments, quiet, peace to themselves every once in a while. A woman to cook for them. Like that's a general statement across the board that most men would prefer to have. Just like most women want a guy that's stable, can take care of himself and her as well, is not going to be too abusive to her. Like these are things that women typically want. So that's totally fine to say, like most women typically want these things, even if there's going to be differences that are minute here and there.
So then to wrap this all back around to the trans conversation, because it does relate. It does start to beg the question though of at some point, does it simplify things to just go to the other side? You see what I'm saying? Like as a man who's not trying to identify with the toxic masculine nature, and you're getting away from it, and you're like, I don't want to identify with this because men are bad and men are evil and the patriarchy and all that. So then it's okay, if I'm not that, then what am I? So then there's either the I'm not anything, or I choose to not play, or I'm gonna go to this other side and decide I'm more feminine. But then it's like, okay, because there's actually a video of a guy or of a trans woman, who was having this conversation because she was like, I'm not attracted to men. So being more feminine, I thought I had to be gay, but I wasn't. So if I'm being true to myself, that didn't fit either. So then what am I? So this is a man who transitioned to being a woman who's a lesbian. And people are like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But if your concept of masculinity is bad, why would you want to be with a man? And why would you want to be a man? So if I don't want to be a man, but I don't want to be with a man, then I'm gonna be a woman who wants to be with a woman. So now I'm a trans lesbian. But then I don't want to be the masculine one.
Yeah.
So I want a woman who's more masculine so I can be less masculine as the what? But this is happening. This is we can pull the video up. Like I'm watching the video of like this is the whole thing. Okay. And then to be real too, like the whole transitional surgery thing, it's kind of a lot. Like I feel Chappelle got a lot of trouble for his comments, but I definitely respect it. He was like, if you feel strongly enough about your internals to start chopping off parts of your body, I respect you. Plain and simple. That's a hell of a commitment. He was like, I'm not that committed to anything. I mean, straight up and down. That's a lot. So I'm not going to tell you how you feel about your life. If you sitting there going to schedule a surgery, pay for it, take expensive hormone treatments, like, dude, you committed. Bravo. Like, I'm not being sarcastic at all. You are all in.
Oh, but speaking of that,
you have to go that far.
Well, speaking of that too, another thing, because I mean, there's always areas of things, just like, in the Black community, we talk a lot about racism that cops have towards Black people, but really there's a conversation people like, but what about the Black people that are actually doing crimes? That's like, we don't want to talk about that because whatever. So there are people in the trans community that go trans and then they realize, oh crap, I actually don't like this. I actually want to go back to what I was before. This actually isn't what I wanted to do at all. They might have had like a identity misgender type of thing where they thought like, oh, because I feel weird, it must mean that I'm a woman instead of a guy. So they get their stuff chopped off, they go to the thing, then they're like, wait, I don't feel like a woman on this side either. Oh crap. I'd rather go back to how I was feeling before. And that's the thing that doesn't get talked about a lot because that also goes against the argument being perpetrated, like, oh, all trans people want to be trans. And it's like, that's not always the case also.
That's to me part of where it becomes dangerous too, because the other part of this conversation we didn't get to yet is when we start talking about children. And there's this big push to where trans children should be given the opportunity to transition at however young an age, down to like 5 and 6, 10, whatever, which is mind-blowing to me that this conversation is on the table, that this is really being pushed. Like, if a kid tells you that they want to be the other gender, then you should go for it 100%. You shouldn't question them and just lean into it. And a part of me is like, how?
I
Like,
just don't know when we started thinking that kids had like the best ideas to do stuff ever. Because I remember me being like 10, 11. The stuff I thought I was cool to do back then. I'm like, that was some dangerous shit. Like, what was I doing?
not
Like,
only
like
that,
letting
like
letting kids.
you're making decisions about things that are major life choices and consenting to surgical procedures and hormone therapies and irreversible level stuff when you're not old enough to decide if you want to smoke a cigarette or drink a beer or
Even have sex yet.
sign a legal document or have sex yet. So you can reassign your sex before you're able to use your sexual organ in the first place legally. That's a lot. That's a lot. But a part of it comes back to the whole well, what are the rules for if somebody is considered the other gender? So part of the thing in athletics is if you went through the reassignment before puberty,
Yeah.
then you don't go through the structural changes that your body does with testosterone going through puberty. So you won't have the muscle density and the bone density and
Yeah.
the different advantages physically that men tend to have from going through puberty as a man if you do it early enough. So that's a part of the push for it. Like, well, if it's gonna stick and be considered official, then you got to do it before all that happens. But it's still real early to be making that type of decision. Like,
Yeah, and honestly, I think about things like, we have friends of ours, for example, that are models. They're attractive. They on the runway wear lingerie, and they'll say they were tomboys. They were young. They were doing all things the boys did. They liked hanging out with boys. They liked doing, we'll say, traditionally masculine energy type activities. So are we going to say, okay, we should go back and be like, oh, if they were feeling like a boy as a kid, they should have transitioned to a boy. Or even, I don't think the term tom girl is used, but there are plenty of boys that play with dresses as kids and like, do girly things and cook and bake all this other stuff. But they might end up growing up and being like full on like built bodybuilding chefs in the kitchen and stuff like that. Should we have said, since he was playing with like, bakery sets back in the day, that he was a winner, we should have let him transition at 9 years old?
I kind of feel like live your life. I'm just like, I don't know. I can see how you feel like somebody should live a certain way, especially when they're related to you. If it's your kid, if it's your
Mm.
niece, nephew, sister, brother, you feel like you kind of have an opinion. And I feel like a lot of that comes from a place of like concern, like, hey, you might run into more problems in society if you go this way.
Mm.
Or, hey, they should be able to do whatever they want. So we're going to push this agenda for them. And I don't feel like it comes from a place of negativity. I feel like it comes from a place of trying to help,
Yeah.
but it can also be damaging if you push something too far or put too much emphasis on it too soon. Like, to me, that's where the let's make sure, where the psychological examinations and the how long has it been that this person felt this way. When you're talking about a child who wants to transition, who's adamantly pushing for it on their own, okay, evaluate that on its own.
Mm.
But like you said, like a girl who's a tomboy, I don't think they should be pushed into it. I don't think they should be, hey, you know what? Have you thought about it? Maybe you are really a boy. Do you want to be a boy? Like, that's too, don't add pressure to it. Let the little girl play with the trucks. Let the little boy play with the dolls. Like, who cares? It's a little kid. Let the little kid be a little kid. Like, honestly, I feel like we shouldn't sexualize children, period. Like,
Mm.
for them to determine what they are or for them to be exposed to the choices of all the different stuff. It's too early. Let them be kids. When they start seeking it out, okay, at that point, yeah, start to help guide. But even then, let them explore. Let them find out on their own. Let the kid be the kid. That's my honest opinion on that whole situation. But it's one of those like, we want to make sure that they know every option is okay. So we're going to just present all the options way early.
Right.
That's a lot. You're now exposing an innocent to lose their innocence before it's necessary, and then wonder why they're doing stuff earlier and earlier. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
not
Sure.
everything has to be sexual. It just doesn't. So I don't know.
Yeah. Now I have a video here that was sent. Well, it's interesting because like the thing is called
An hour later.
it's called How Feminism Led to the Trans Movement. And it's interesting because it's actually a video by a woman. So a lot of times, there'll be things come out and men try to give their opinion. And of course, men get canceled right away. But it's interesting to hear from a woman's perspective, like what her thoughts are about this topic.
Real
Yes.
quick, what you saying that once again, my little thought experiment. A part of me wants to do it just to shut that conversation up of, oh, you're a man, you don't get to have an opinion. How dare you assume my gender? That's really how I be feeling. Because now you can't tell me to shut up for being a man. But I don't think that's proper motivation. So that's why I just want to write it into a character. But I really be feeling like, you want to play? All right, let's play. Because really, oh, you don't look like, you can't base it on how I look. You don't know how I identify on the inside.
It defies all logic in terms of like the thought processes you're going through to try to have your argument. It's like, what? I don't know. But again, maybe because we're not in that position, that maybe we feel different if we were. But it seems kind of odd to, because again, like even if like for example, like say like a white person came to us and was like, hey, I have these thoughts about the Black community. Like again, we can still have a respectful conversation. I might have more insight and I might disagree with his points, but he might also have stuff that's like, oh, you know what? This might be something to consider to look into in our community and see if we could be tripping on some stuff.
Well, I do that. So like I really stopped with the whole, well, I may have a different opinion in that situation. Because honestly, I put myself in situations and play them out and try to see how it goes. And I'm open to listening to the opposing opinion and really weighing it out. I don't know if we talked about it already, but I know I wanted to, but just looking into the whole thing from the Black perspective, like there's some issues that I've really had to reevaluate and really dug into like, okay, am I seeing this from a slanted perspective because of my position?
Right. Because we did the one about the racism and the police shootings and stuff like that back in April with your brother-in-law. Like, yeah, that was definitely a situation of like, oh, you know, this white cop goes to this party and shoots and kills this Black woman, but it's like, what was the thing? It's like all those things are things again that we don't want to typically talk about because it doesn't push our narrative of, but overall we're being this way, but that doesn't mean that those outliers aren't equally as important because like. And that's a whole different show altogether. But like, yeah, like those kind of issues come up. So it's the same thing with these other various things with the trans community. They have their own internal issues going on about what their different opinions are. Because they're a trans man, they'll be like, I'm a trans man, but no, I'm trans. I'm not a man. I'm a trans man. Versus another guy being like, or another trans man being like, but I'm a full man. That's their own argument also. You know, they can have their own opinions about that as well and have a civil discussion about it versus like, well, you don't feel this way, you're going to get kicked out and you're hating yourself.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be taken to the level of, it's not physical violence. It's, I forgot the terminology. It's social reputation destruction, I think they called it. Basically, the breakdown was men tend to fight in a more physical, logical, argumentative realm, where it's me versus you. Whereas women, or let's just say feminine energy, tends to fight in a realm of reputation destruction. It's not me versus you. It's me and everyone I can get on my team now don't like you. And it's a society is against you. You're not wrong because I think you're wrong. We all think you're wrong. And so logic doesn't matter because the group hates you. And like that type of, it's harsher psychologically and it's more permanent. That makes sense. Yeah. So it's just as dangerous, but it's not seen as dangerous because it's not physical. And the conversation right now is that masculine, toxic masculinity. And so we're not talking about the things that are toxic on the other side. And so when those rear their head, you kind of just got to take it. And that's what's happening with a lot of social media. The more you have YouTubes and blogs and podcasts and all the rest of this stuff, it's people in a public realm. So if you can destroy the public opinion of that person, you do a lot more damage. Sure. And it's really easy to do because you can do it from your phone on Twitter. You can do it on YouTube.
That picture, send, done.
And then there's a whole team of people that's just ready to go. The jump on. So, oh yeah, that's right. That's what I said. You saw this, and then it's like 50,000 people all saying the same thing. Oh, they must be wrong because 50,000 people said they're wrong.
And it's interesting because they'll go to agree with that person without doing the research on the thing the person's actually talking about to see if they're even correct. Like there's so many times like people come out and say like, oh, someone said this, and this. Funny enough, and I know this is bad to say, but like a lot of that happened with Trump too. Like I'm not a Trump supporter at all, but there were definitely times where like he'd say some stuff in the news for sure, but then news media would quote him saying something that he didn't actually say. And I'm like, see, this is what, and then he come out and say fake news, but like, yeah, because he said these 9 things, you chose the 10th thing that he didn't say, and that's proving his point.
Yeah.
You know?
And yeah, so it's like I really had to kind of reevaluate, especially recently, like especially with this last year. It's just, okay, where do I really stand on a lot of these things?
Mm,
And I found that my actual place is a lot more moderate than I thought.
mm.
Um, and largely because of how extreme things would get on one side or the other. Like, I don't agree with everything you saying, and I
Yeah,
don't agree with everything you say. Like, everybody tripping. Okay, look.
yeah. No, it's funny. I think we had the discussion like a lot of my views on like dating and stuff like that are actually they tend to lead more conservative than I expected in terms of like the things that work for me in a relationship. It's like, oh shoot, like man, I didn't realize that until I started looking like a lot of the content creators that are out there on YouTube that I
Mhm.
enjoy. It's like I'll agree with their dating stuff and not necessarily their political stuff. And I'm like, but it's interesting that I agree so much more with their dating stuff. And why is that? It's like, oh, I never thought about that before. You know?
That was a part of why I had to reevaluate my stance on a lot of Black matters, Black types of African American issues,
Mhm.
because a lot of the more conservative YouTubers or podcasters,
Mhm.
I would agree on their points in a lot of areas. And I realized I might be more right leaning than I ever thought I was, because like Black culture tends to be left leaning.
Yeah.
And we kind of are raised in that. But then when I really looked at issues and really looked at the conversations on the table, I was like, I agree here, 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 here. But then we hit this Black Lives Matter conversation, and it'd be a wall. It's just instant like, oh yeah, nah, y'all tripping now. Wait a minute. Let me actually listen to what's being said right now. And there's still some points I don't agree with. I'm
Yeah.
not even gonna try to pretend like it's 100%.
Yeah.
But I took the time to listen and really evaluate, is there anything of worth in what's being said? And there were some things that I think we need to deal with as a culture. Like, yeah, there's some stuff over here we need to clear out before we push this as hard as we're pushing it.
Mm.
And to their point, there's a lot of things we're looking for the racism in it. And
Yeah.
so there's a pushback because, okay, not everything is racist. And so we're hearing a lot more of that side of the conversation. And it's just like, okay, we have to accept that.
Mm.
While we're looking for it, we're gonna have to ease up on things that it's not there.
Yeah.
So
And I do notice, I do find myself at times when I'm like, when I see certain incidents or think of certain things, the first thing I think of like, oh, that's racism. And I'm like, but why is that? Like,
yeah,
realistically, yes, we live in a society where racism is a thing, but also I don't think every white person out there or any other person is actively always being like, I made a decision because I'm trying to hate. It's like they have their own lived experience too, that they're doing things as a result of that lived experience that may not necessarily correlate with mine or might
mhm.
not be gelling with mine, but that doesn't mean it's coming from a racist standpoint, even if it seems like that to me because of how my view is of things.
We're gonna have to do this one next time because there's a
Okay,
video. It was a Rogan interview. I think I sent it. We're gonna have to comment on that one because he
okay,
broke it down in the way I thought was the best. So we'll come back to that. Let's watch Old
okay.
Girl's video.
Go ahead and watch this lady talk, and I'll pause it at certain times. We can, discuss what she's talking about. So here we go.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about the idea that men and women are interchangeable, that men can do everything women can do and vice versa, and that there's little to no difference between men and women and their abilities apart from those that have been foisted upon us by societal constructs. To start off, we have to take a look at the political and cultural attack against the concept of what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman. For example, for a long time now, we've seen the mainstream media, politicians, and various activist groups claim that a man can be a woman and vice versa, either if they medically transition, if they dress like one, or simply if they claim that they are one. From
Now, this is what we've heard a lot. Obviously, is that if a woman becomes a male, she is now an actual man. She is a trans man, and therefore she can do things that men can't. But at the same time, we see the thing that you said earlier about like oh, men that can become pregnant. When in the history forever has that actually what happened on a biological level? If you're born as a biological man, you can't have kids through your stomach because you don't have a uterus, all that stuff. So we're now saying by default that men can also have uteruses.
It goes back to changing the definitions. It's just this word doesn't mean what it used to mean.
Mm.
That's really what's happening. It's We're redefining what this word means. So by the new definition, it works. So yeah, now that's no longer a thing. But you then lose the meaning of words as a whole before
Right.
it's over, which is scary.
Well, it's also funny. Some would argue that like, oh, like there's more than two genders. There's like a multitude of genders, and we need to recognize all of them versus just putting it into two. The whole binary, non-binary thing, like, oh, you can't just say just man and woman. There's a spectrum of what that is. But yeah,
So I kind of just had a realization as you were saying that of the issue people are fighting to fix is stereotypes. It's really coming down to people expect me to be a certain way or act a certain way, and I don't want to be or act that way based on your assumption of how you think I'm supposed to be. Therefore, I want to redefine it. And so we're trying to adapt the words to fit more people's feelings when honestly, we really just need to get rid of the stereotypes.
Mm.
Like we were talking about men crying. If it's not a negative for men to cry, then it's okay for men to cry. We don't have to say that's not masculine. We don't have to say I don't feel masculine because I cry. You can just be a man who cries.
So basically, if we were more accepting overall about the things people want to do, whether it's like a man wants to wear a dress, woman wants to wear a suit, or have her hair a certain way, or he wants to wear makeup, if we weren't judging these things, people wouldn't feel obligated to have to then try to change their gender because they're saying, well, all these activities are saying that I must be female leaning, therefore I should need to be a female.
I feel like that's what it is. I feel like it's kind of an extreme reaction to being judged. And I feel like the more people feel judged, the more they're going to try to stop that and lash out at what's judging them. So yeah, honestly, yeah, if you're a man and you want to wear a dress and you don't get negative repercussions for it, you're not going to have to be like, oh, well, now I'm a woman. You just wear a dress and be happy.
But the question is, what are the realistic odds of that happening as a whole in society?
Well, that's kind of what I think this is pushing for. So by going to this extreme, it's normalizing lesser things. So if we're going this far and there's pushback, I think it's going to settle to, okay, we'll be cooler about this stuff. Just don't try to go over here again. You see what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that's kind of the nature of the extremes. Yeah. So I feel like this will balance out to that at some point. And the younger generation is more open to it. It's us old heads that still.
I was saying, it's like at the ages we're at, I feel it's like we're at the point now where like our parents were back in the day of like, oh, I don't understand this new generation thinking or acting this way. And I do think about the fact that, you know, as kids, we get teased for that kind of stuff. So we get socialized very early on from like kindergarten up. If we do certain things that are more female leaning, or if a woman does it and it's more masculine leaning, we're going to get chastised for it. And to your point, there are a lot more coming up now that are like, hey, we're going to be accepting everybody because we don't like the fact that the current generation has all these drugs that they take to try to feel better about themselves, or have to be in therapy all the time, et cetera, et cetera. We want to just say, hey, Bobby over there is queer leaning, non-binary leaning, and we want to accept him or her for as they are. And that's not a bad thing at all. It's just an interesting thing for our generation of like, wait, they're doing what now? Like little Bobby's now little Christina? Like what's going on? I don't understand. And maybe it's not, maybe that's just our thing that we don't understand. We have to get accustomed to it.
The other thing too is we were dealing with a society that wasn't accepting of these things. So if you were somebody who was accepting, you would also get ostracized. Because think about how many celebrities were caught with a tranny and all over the news. And it's just like
you can't say tranny, by the way. You can't say tranny.
No, I'm saying what was in the news.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
What the news article said. So that was a whole thing for so long where if somebody did decide that they were open to being with somebody in that lifestyle, they were ostracized. Their career was in jeopardy. So
and they were automatically gay also.
So it's just like there's judgment and negative repercussions no matter what part of it you're on. So this whole push is like, we want to end that. We want to make everything acceptable. Whatever you feel like being, just it's fine. And it's just like, yeah, but it's going a little far. That's the only thing. It's to where it's getting to the point where we're going to make it negative for you not to accept it. And it's just like, you're just reversing the judgment. It's not evening. We're going to take power and then impose that power onto you. Yeah. And that's where people are like, okay, whoa, ease up. Let's just balance it to everything's cool versus you gotta jump on board 100% or you're phobic and misogynistic and toxic. And like, who wants to be called toxic? That's terrible. Like, word. Who wants to be called trash? Who wants to be called, like, just, can you not judge this harshly? Can I just be okay? Can I just say it's cool? No, you have to be all on board. You got to be on team holding the sign at the parade. Like, whoa, okay, hold on, guys. I can be like,
Hollywood, being on Hollywood, like, I've been on sets with, I've worked with, like, it's like, hey, and it's like, again, whether I'm agreeing with what they're identifying as or not, I'm still going to treat them in that moment and in general just as they want to be treated, which should be a good general rule overall, Like, I'm not gonna be like, no, we need to act. I think you're more a he, so I'm gonna call you a he. Like, I'm not gonna do some disrespectful stuff, but I'm not gonna necessarily agree in my head that, oh, this person is that thing. Yeah. Anyway, continuing on with the video here.
What naturally followed was the idea that men can menstruate, men can get pregnant, and men can breastfeed because women who have transitioned into men are considered actual men. And conversely, men who transition into women are considered actual women who are simply unable to do things like get pregnant or breastfeed or menstruate, although some people do claim that they can experience menstruation-like symptoms. As an example of just how confusing all of this can get, celebrity Ellen Page recently came out as transgender, taking on the name Elliot Page, but the fact that as a woman Page was a lesbian means that as a man Page would technically now be considered straight.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. For starters, though, this video was made in February. Elliot Page recently released a picture where she's at a pool with her shirt completely off, but because she doesn't have breast anymore, it's now perfectly okay for her to do that. And
was it on Instagram?
Huh?
Was it on Instagram?
Yes.
Really?
It's on national media. Like, it's on Yahoo News. It's on Entertainment Weekly. Like, it's a picture of Elliot Page shirtless with, like, and by the way, Elliot Page abs for days. Like, I'm like, I need to get back in the gym myself because his abs were amazing.
Did you have them removed or?
Yes.
Okay.
So now it's like a guy's chest.
That's been a whole thing on Instagram for the longest of if it's a female nipple, it's banned, but if it's a male nipple, it's fine.
It is not at all blurred out in any kind of media.
As you mentioned, we have several friends who are models who have Instagram pages who are disabled and taken down all the time for inappropriate exposure. But so yeah, if they decided to identify as a man, could they then like sue Instagram for removing their pictures for inappropriate exposure to their male part?
That would be a good experiment to try.
That's how I think. I'm like, okay, if these are new rules, then how do we implement the rules? Because there's already been a whole free to nipple movement. And I'm like, because I'm a guy, it's pervy to say it, but I'm actually all for it. Like, dude, like, why is there this censorship? So like going back in time, it used to be illegal for anybody to be exposed in that way. Yeah. Men or women could not walk around shirtless. The laws are different because men were like, screw you, I'm going to do it anyway. And so they were like, we're not going to get them to stop, so let's change the laws. Fine, men can walk around without shirts. That's how that happened. That is the history of why it's illegal for women to be exposed and not for men. Because men didn't care. Because men didn't care. And so in certain states, it's already like that. Like in New York City, women can walk around topless. And the police are told, do not bother the woman, deal with any of the men who try to harass her. And more like places are adopting this, and I'm all for it. I'm like, dude, I live in Vegas. How many optional pools are out here? They're trying to censor it. What's the whole advertisement? Optional, top optional. Women can come here and sunbathe, and women love it because I don't have to have all these tan lines from my bikini. I could just have a nice even tan. Makes sense. And where it's like, oh well, if you're a man and you're for it, you're pervy. Or how about just I think it's a stupid rule.
And also, women are still dudes with like chest and abs and stuff too. Like,
women are pervs too, or at least can be.
More so. Like, that's an old conversation altogether too. But yeah, like when they feel to do for real, like the whole thing of like rejection, all stuff goes out the window.
I've seen women not even see the dude's face. I've witnessed this where she walked up and stared and talked to his abs and was just like, "Oh my God, you're amazing. Your physique is amazing." And you looking like her friends were like, he was hideous. And she was like, he had a face.
Huh?
Yeah. I witnessed this happen more than once. And I'm just sitting there like, how y'all gonna talk about dudes when y'all are so much worse when you want to be? But that's, like you said, it's a different conversation. But it just comes down to let people live. Like that's really where I realized I might be more right-leaning than left-leaning, because the real thing is government influence versus let the people make their own decisions. And on the right, it's kind of like local government, kind of live your life, make your money, do what you do. Let's not trip. And where the left is like, no, we need to regulate this more. The government needs to decide what people do. Yeah. And in that conversation, I'm kind of like, yeah, kind of let people live. Like when it becomes an issue, we'll deal with it. But like, it's hot outside. It's summertime. Technically, in this city, if she want to walk around with no shirt on in the streets, she can. That's the way that works. According to the laws, yes. That is not considered indecent exposure. She might be shunned. An individual location may ask her to leave by their rules, but legally, she's fine. And so if she want to go to the pool with no shirt on, a parent might be like, oh my God, and take their kid away. A dude might be like, hey, all right. But legally, she's not gonna get arrested for it.
Okay.
Not in this city. So it's what it is.
Mm.
But there's specific places for it. Like
I
the
just found
pool.
it interesting also in the video that like said that she was saying like because as what was her name before? Shoot, I forgot her original name.
Ellen?
Huh? Yeah, as
Ellen
Ellen Page.
Page.
As Ellen Page, she was a lesbian, but now as Elliot Page, she would be considered a straight man. That really is like the thing of like these now words are not only what they don't mean what they mean, but they're now fluctuating depending on how you identify yourself in the circumstance. Which again is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's interesting that she also pointed that out.
Hold up, but now I'm thinking about her partner. Is that unfair to her partner or his partner?
And is the partner now considered sexist or not an ally if she's like, but I still like women. So
that's what I'm saying. So if you change your gender, if I was a lesbian dating a woman and then that woman changed the gender and is now a man, you're now forcing me to be straight when I wanted to be a lesbian.
And that's a lot of the discussion that people have is like, you know, a lot of people that do have their partner change genders, they even end up divorcing because it's like, because it's that the thing of like people think they want to think like, oh, I just love this person for this person, but that person's parts, how they're living their life in terms of the masculine or female energy, all that stuff actually has a say in how attracted you are to them if you're leaning towards a certain type of person.
Yeah.
So it's not feelings. It's not even it's not facts or feelings. It's feelings over feelings at some level. Like I feel towards this particular energy, and you're no longer that energy. So now I don't feel those feelings for you anymore.
Well, the other side of that too is it goes back to the whole judgments and societal norms and everything. Mm-hmm. So if you go back a generation, even some of the same sex relationships were so shunned that people wouldn't be open to it. So if you're a man who's gay, but society will shun you, there's violence, there's all this other stuff, then you have to play the game of, okay, well, let me try to conform to society. So then you do get married to a woman and have some kids, but really you're gay. So that's where the whole culture came from. But then once it opens up where, okay, now it's more accepted in society and you can be out as you are, you decide, okay, I want to go live the life I really felt like living this whole time. There's a whole situation now where you got a whole family that's looking at you like,
yeah.
So what? You see what I'm saying?
Like him to 60 to become what she was. It's like, but you now have like daughters and sons and stuff that gotta like now they gotta suddenly be okay with this thing when they've known you as this person for 60 something years.
And the root of it came down to the judgment of society to the point where you feel pressured to not be who you truly feel like you are. So I get that side of it. I honestly do, to where it's like you should be free to live your life the way you want to live it, short of it harming others. And that's how I really feel about this whole scenario. So like I said, Caitlyn, you want to wear a dress and live as a woman, be fashionista, the whole nine. Live your life. Like, why do person over here, why do you care? You see what I'm saying? Now the wife and the children, I get them having an opinion. However, that's not your life. So to some extent, you kind of got to let that person live their life.
Well, I think people's fear is always like, you know, for example, let's say I had kids, okay? So I see somebody out there that's trans. I'm not whatever, but I might be like, oh, my kid's going to get influenced by this person to do the same thing. And then that's going to affect our family and our lineage. And so I got to make this go away so it won't affect me. I think that's yeah.
Like I've had family members who felt like they couldn't be a part of the family because they'd be judged for their sexual orientation. So they fall away from the family. And you're just like, yo, what happened to so-and-so? Where's so-and-so go? And you just don't see them no more. Yeah. Why? Because they didn't feel like they could show up as they were. So I do think that there is something positive coming from this movement of it's forcing people to be more accepting of people who don't think the way you think. And I definitely think that's necessary. I just also think that is going a little far in certain cases. And we shouldn't have to redefine words to accept people. Because even in the redefinitions, you're not going to get everybody. So,
yep.
Like I said, like the other person, the dude that felt like a woman who didn't feel attracted to men didn't have a place even with the redefinitions. So they had to go and make a whole new another definition because he was like, I tried to be gay, but I'm not gay. So I didn't fit there either. Yep. It was just like, I don't know where I fit because there's not any options for me because it's either a man or a woman. That's not the problem. The problem is this is what man has to be. This is what woman has to be. If you can be a woman who wears pants with short hair, and it's okay, then you're probably going to be fine being a woman who can wear pants and short hair and not have to be like, oh, I don't feel like this. Let me go find my rightful place. I feel more like a man. Why do you feel like a man? Because men can do these things and it's okay. So I'm just like, whatever you are, if you can make your decisions as what you are, I think there'll be less of a push to try to change into something else. Now, I could be wrong. And I'm not saying it'll completely go away. There'll still be people who feel like there's something else. But the fact that you can't change the biological aspect of it.
Yeah.
So no matter how much I decide I feel like a woman, I'm not going to have a menstrual cycle and I'm not going to be able to have a baby.
Or that's, that's like a chromosome like injected into you.
I can't change those facts. So no matter how much I feel like I should be able to carry a baby inside of my body, there's no surgery for that. I can't switch that up. So if we're talking about cosmetic stuff, I feel like the lack of judgment would open that door and calm a lot of this down. So that's just my analysis.
Yeah.
But,
Let's continue on.
Debate has also resulted in fundamental societal changes, such as men now being allowed to compete in women's sports, being allowed to use women's bathrooms, being allowed to be imprisoned in women's prisons, and so on.
The bathroom one and the jail one are really big ones. And I don't know how we remedy that, because like realistically, like I said, if you have a trans female that's felt like a female her whole life, and she gets sent to a male prison because they're identifying her as her previous gender that she identified with, then that's its own issue. So how do you feel about that whole thing with the gender, with the bathrooms and with the prison stuff?
It gets complicated. And the bigger this issue gets, what's going to happen is you're going to have to build specialized facilities. And that's really how I feel it'll end up. Right now, you just have where nobody wins. There was a similar situation where it was a homeless shelter, and homeless shelters are separated where men cannot go to women's facilities. I think women and children have one set of facilities, and the men have a separate one. And so there was a woman who was in a homeless shelter, and then they put a trans woman in her room with her. Like they had to share the same space. And to her, she was like, okay, I've been assaulted by men. I don't feel comfortable being in this intimate setting, sharing a room with someone who I see as a man. All I see when I look over there. And I know, I'm supposed to not see that that's a man, but the physicality of what I see is traumatic for me, because this reminds me of what I was traumatized by. So I don't want to stay in this scenario. And so they were on her like, no, you're wrong, because you have to accept this trans woman as being a woman, and you should be fine with it, regardless of your trauma, regardless of how you feel. This takes priority. And so it's one of those, like, at some point, it's not going to land right. It's not going to make sense. And so that's why I'm like, it's eventually going to have to be, okay, there's now a third facility built for people who don't fit into category A or category B. Because if there's enough of them,
cost though, like that's going to cost extra money to try to do that.
But you're trying to not offend people. Otherwise, you go where it makes sense for you to go, and that's offensive. And there's all kind of lawsuits going to happen. But that's kind of where we are,
right?
But
to your point, in that situation, like if it's a trans female, but she still has male parts, in the other woman's head, she could technically still get raped by this other person. Not that it's going to necessarily happen if they're, whatever, but like it could. In her, it's just like, how do I know that?
And once again, who said that's not a lesbian? So she could be making passing comments. Like people were saying, like the person was making comments about the other women's anatomies and things, making everybody feel uncomfortable. Like, yo, that's not a woman. They're not acting like a woman.
Yeah.
Well, there are women who are lesbians who are very prominent. So how you say that they're not acting like a woman?
Right. Because those lesbians are doing masculine behavior. So that's why. Yeah.
So it's just one of those, like, where does it end? There's no solution. There can't be a solution because there's no definitions to words. It's like you take in math. Oh my God, because this is actually a real thing now that I'm saying it. But like if you're in math class and then the numbers don't have actual meanings of what the numbers mean. So like you write a 2, but that really means 15. And you just like, because like even if it's like X and Y, you have to assign what X and Y,
right?
What numbers those are.
Depending on the
day, you're solving for X, but there's an actual answer to what X is. So it's one of those, like, it has to mean something or it doesn't mean anything.
And that's why I wonder too about like in terms of allyship, there's definitely a lot more women on the grounds being allies to transgender women and men than males are. And I wonder if a lot of it has to do with the fact that a lot of how men base things is on like the facts, like 1+1 is 2, X and Y chromosomes equals guy, X and X equals female. And a lot of times for women, it's like because they're empathizing, they're going on the feelings of it. This person feels like this, therefore their reality must be valid, even if they weren't born this way, but they feel that way. So therefore it must be a justifiable thing that they are. And I think that's where a lot of clash comes from cis men and women, is that on our end, we're just kind of like, but we can respect them as a woman, but still say like we don't see them that way because of these various facts. And we're not adding the emotional or empathetic part in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've said this not in a public forum, but if we're getting to like choose our pronouns and determine how we're identified and stuff, can I not be cis? Like, I just really wanted to address that since you brought up.
Isn't it interesting that they want us to respect their pronouns, but if we say, "Hey, I don't like the word cis being on my gender, I just want to be male," all of a sudden it's like patriarchy, and oh, you're not being an ally. It's like, no, I just don't want to have the definitions put on me, just like you want me to call you the definitions that you want put on you.
So, like, I can break it down to the same judgmental conversation. So, as far as feeling rejected or feeling judged, as a masculine identifying male, one of the things that people say to demasculate you is to call you a sissy.
Oh.
Women tend to refer to each other as cis, especially like modern slang. It's like, oh, cis this, cis that. Yep. So even though it's spelled differently, the sound is it's still in a way. I don't know.
It's like feminine language.
It's demasculating. It's taking away masculinity. It's putting a negative spin on masculinity, and it's subtle and it's argument because that's not what it is. But if we're going by the definitions, I guess it's supposed to be like a scientific or biological definition of a word, but we're throwing those away anyway, right? So
wait, so if you were called like bro male instead, would that be better? Versus cis.
I mean, I don't like bro either, but if I had to pick between the two, like, bro, like, dude, it's just, I just feel like it's another jab that's used that can kind of be like argued away if you're trying to go by the logical. Oh, well, it's from your logic. It's from science. I can call you cis. No, I'm not buying it. And I don't like it. If you want allies, let go of that one. I feel like. You want masculine identifying male allies. Stop calling this.
We'll commit to learn your pronouns and saying, trying to keep you as he or she and remembering that if you can just let go of this thing.
I mean, that's just me. I can't say all men will agree with this, but that's where I'm at. That's the one I don't agree with. Like
that's another example of like for years up to this point, we've been using the term male and man without having to add these things to it. Maybe the new generation doesn't mind that at all. Maybe that's how they now identify. Just I'm sure at one point, like it's kind of like the whole like
normalized
versus colored versus black thing. It's like maybe over time it changed and we didn't know about it.
Oh, it's changed a lot. It's changed a whole lot. There's people to this day who don't identify as black because of the negative connotations that come with the word black. And it's just like, but it's so accepted and normalized that a lot of us are like, that's the preferred. I know people who are like, if you call me Negro, it reminds me of slave times when we were considered chattel animals. So don't call me Negro. But that's the technical, like the technical term.
Yeah.
So you open a can because I did the whole study on that back in the day.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. It's just one of those like, okay, so where does it land? And you're never gonna make everybody happy. You're gonna offend somebody. That's kind of what it comes down to. So are there certain levels where it should be protected? Absolutely. I still think that racism exists, and I still think that using certain racial slurs should come with some consequences. However, I think there should be some case-by-case analysis of when that's a thing and when it's not. So the same thing with all of this. Do I think that it should be a protection for people who choose to identify in different ways than we are used to? Absolutely. Do I think that everybody who mispronounces or doesn't know that this person's particular pronouns are Z and Zer should be facing criminal consequences? No, that's a little hard.
Society, like, no.
Like, I shouldn't just be like, well, you decided to say that I was black when I consider myself a zebra. So, you know what? That's a hate crime. well, I've never met anybody else who wanted to be called a zebra. So I'm sorry, but you got to let me know that. And then you got to give me a little leeway to adjust to it because I'm not used to saying zebra. I'm used to saying black. Oh, you're a black man. I'm not a black man. That's disrespectful. And I can back that up with every argument I want to if I decide to.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm like, you got to be a little easier with it. And that's what I've seen from there's been a few people who posted who were transgender who were like, hey, this is going too far and we're making people mad and we're going to lose what allies we do have because we're attacking everybody.
And they a little thing. Yeah.
They jumped on.
I think with like white allies where it's like they're asking questions and it's like they might recognize that a particular question makes us feel a certain way, but we got to express that. Hey, when you ask this question, this is why it feels this kind of way. And they're like, oh, okay, now I know. The more you know, versus just being like,
oh, you gotta have some grace. You gotta have some grace for that learning curve. Because just because you said it once, don't mean they're gonna remember it. Okay. Don't mean they're gonna get it right every time. They're gonna slip.
Other things during this show. I'm like, hope you might be like, they called Elliot Page a she at one point. Like, oh my god, like
we just slipped 4-5 times. But it's like, to me, that's showing effort. The fact that you slip and correct it, okay, I'm trying to get it right. I'm trying to get there. It's just I gotta overcome a lot of years. Not even years, a lifetime of another way of thinking. And it's going to take a minute. And it's even worse for people in the older generations. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it.
They're just kind of like, look, you can hate me for now. You cancel me, I'll be dead in 2 years anyway. So
they're over there like, we're trying to survive a pandemic. So y'all not getting vaccinated. I'm going to call you she and him. You know what I mean? Like, and I ain't even mad at that. Like, well, they got y'all was like, let them die. Really? And you want me to call you something different? Get out of here. So there's that side of it too. Like everybody needs to try to work with everybody else. Everybody got something they want. Yeah. And everybody got something that they need to survive. So, okay, let's all try to make this work. It's so many people. It's hard to work with everybody's needs. And that's where the conflict comes in. Okay, well, who gets priority? Do we give priority to natural born women or to trans women? Well, right now the trans women are louder. And there's more danger there, we think. So we're going to give them priority over the natural born women when it comes to women's issues.
And it's like they try to correlate that into like, oh, the trans women's issues are also women's issues. But realistically, if those two collide together, more often than not, the ones that are typically going to be championed for or being fought for are the ones that are of the lesser. There's lesser trans women than actual women. So they're going to be, ironically, prioritized first. Which again, women were really
the political landscape. It's which one is more of a hot button. Basically, which one am I going to face greater consequences for? And right now, it's trans issues. You will get canceled a lot faster for trans issues than for feminist issues at this moment. But in that same hierarchy, men's issues don't even try to speak. You sit in the corner because we're dealing with the big fish right now. You shut up. Oh, yeah. So that's kind of how that whole thing is. So once again, by this logic, as a man, as a heterosexual cis man, you're at a disadvantage. So if you wanted to change the advantage, then you would just switch over and play the other side of the game. You can go from the bottom to the top of the hierarchy of who gets listened to more by a decision that can't be proven. And that's crazy to me. I can't wrap my head around it. Like, how is that a thing? So let's finish what she's saying.
Resulted in a push to erase all gendered language. For example, midwives in Brighton have been told they can replace the word breastfeeding with chest feeding and mother with mother or birth.
Men got breast too. This is a breastplate for guys.
Parent, as part of efforts to be more gender inclusive. They've also been told that breast milk should be replaced by phrases such as human milk, breast, chest milk, and milk from the feeding mother or parent. Furthermore, NHS instructed not to use the word mother and to instead use the term pregnant people so as not to offend transgender people. Granted, both of these articles came out of the UK, but we are...
How does that offend...
States.
You said what?
I just don't understand how the word mother is offensive to trans people.
Well, seriously, they say like you can say mother or person feeding, but they kept mother there. They didn't say you can call it father, which again, if trans,
well, that's what I'm saying. Like the whole reason to say birthing person is instead of mother,
yeah,
which would mean that mother is somehow offensive. Like that's like, why do we need a new word?
Right.
I don't.
If we're going to the thing of like trans men can also have babies, why can't we just say father feeding? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with throwing the word father in there?
Well, what I'm saying is, if
he's also a father. He's a father that can have a kid. Why are we not putting the father? Why is the masculine father not okay to put there?
So why can't the man just be a mother?
See, now we're getting definitions.
I'm saying, okay, it's a trans man, right? A woman who transitions to being a man.
Because if she's not trying to identify as a woman, then mother is.
Who says woman? Who has
term?
We're redefining terms. If we're redefining terms, then mother should not necessarily be a feminine term. Then it's just it's a birthing person. We got to make a whole new word. We're redefining these words, but we got to make new words because these words are too much like those words that we redefined in the first place. Just it hurts.
All right, continuing.
Example, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Rules Committee Chairman James P. McGovern recently introduced gender-neutral language in new rules for Congress. Obviously, rules aren't bound by law, but there have been instances of people in the UK being investigated and even arrested for misgendering transgender people. And the question is, how long before similar measures come to the United States and other Western countries?
That is an interesting question of like, they're coming after people for saying stuff in quotes by they're not calling a person to. Now, again, I have the whole thing about social media in general, about like social media is causing the destruction of stuff in general, with people being able to spout whatever they want to at any given time. But that said, like, even if, like, for example, I don't agree with, I'm not agreeing necessarily that somebody, that how they're identifying is how they actually are. Like, I'm also like, I don't want to be the a-hole that's on there saying, oh, you're a thing, this isn't it. Like, why would I do that? Why would people do that? Like, why is that thing somebody feels they have to do? I'm gonna go in there and identify you out and call you out and call you this thing.
Well, for one, it gets you attention, like the whole no press is bad press type of situation. Two, there's people who just are like, this is wrong, and I'm going to speak for what's right, regardless of whatever. So there's always going to be that side of things. I'm more of like a live and let live, but that's not how everybody is. Like, the attack on this is an attack on society as a whole, or it's an attack on the family. There's a religious side of it. You know, you're going after God, and now I have to attack because, you know, holy wars and all this type of stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I see where that comes from. Yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a whole big thing of, you know, everybody thinks they're right and righteous, and there's no one more dangerous than someone who's convinced that they're right, and that's what we're dealing with.
Right.
So if you're convinced that you are absolutely correct and you're willing to die for it, and I'm convinced that I'm absolutely correct and I'm willing to die for it, that means we have to go to war and see who dies. So it's not quite to the level of death, but it's social stigma. They say I'm gonna die on this hill. So I'm just gonna keep talking until it crucifies me, or I get my point across.
Now, in that same issue, do you think people should be getting arrested and locked up for doing that kind of thing?
There's a level of harassment. There's a level of bullying. Like, those things come into play, which is where I see why people want to push it to that level.
Okay.
But no, like, that's a lot. I don't really like the whole concept of jail as it is. Like, I'm not saying nobody needs to be there, but definitely not as many people that are in there should be there. So definitely not for saying some tweets. You gotta go to jail for a tweet. Like, I think we forget what jail is like. And I feel like that's a little harsh for typing something with your thumbs on your phone, for my Boondocks fans out there. Yeah, like, that's a lot. That's a lot. So, like, the social stigma ain't enough. The canceling of the shows ain't enough. You're talking jail time now?
Plus, I'm wondering, like, realistically, who this is going to affect. So think about, like, you know, again, the previous president in office, how many tweets he put out there that were definitely bullying people. It's like, would he be under this law, be able to get arrested also? Or maybe he's like, oh, but he's exempt because he's president and he's also a white male.
But he could get arrested. He could just pardon himself.
Yeah, that is true.
I don't know. It's a lot. It really is a lot. It's just, that's what I'm saying. This is where we're not bringing the law into it, and that's where I think it's too far. Like, have your opinion, identify as you want to identify, do your best to market your agenda, and convince people to follow it, no problem. Use political sway and legal muscle to force people, too far. That's a level of control that it's too far for whatever this agenda is too far. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's rules for hate speech because of the level of actual physical real world violence attached to it. Can we say all the words? I forgot how censored we are.
I mean, I don't know what you're trying to say. So
the N one.
Oh, the Negroid word.
The not nice one.
Okay.
I'm just saying, like, that one has some consequences attached to it because people were literally hung by the neck until they died while it was being screamed at them. I think, that might kind of hold some weight in the, maybe we should stop that. But then there were people who were like, hey, let's like normalize it and make it cool. So we're not going to have that be a thing anymore. And it's just like, I don't know, guys, let's be careful because there was a reason it was taken to that extreme. So I don't know. So are we going to let go of that protection? Because there are still people who might feel that way and not have to face legal repercussions. Like, it's one thing if you beat somebody up, but then if you beat somebody up and call them a hate speech word, then it has another level of consequence to it. That's what that's there for. So in those type of circumstances, I could see there being some rules for hate speech, for gender identification type of stuff. Okay, I get it. If somebody's getting beaten while being called certain words, by all means, let's protect against that. Now, if we're saying I want that same level of punishment for somebody accidentally tweeting the wrong gender of me, I can't justify that. How are you going to say you need to go to jail because I wanted to be called Z and you said he and I feel disrespected, so string them up? No, like, hey, dude, call me by my proper title. Like, you can say it, you can push your agenda. I don't think there should be a government that shows up at your house and arrests you and take you to jail.
Yeah.
Especially when we're not just talking about he or she. Like I said, you got they and them. That's a whole grammar change you have to make. You have to change the laws of the English language to do that. That's now calling a singular noun plural because you decided that's how you want to be. You are now not just saying you're a different gender, you're saying you're more than one person.
And I think people think people will say, like, oh, wait, if it's, if they're trying to be an ally or they want to be respectful, then they'll just do it. It's like, but just do it. I'm thinking about, like, even something was like, again, the Demi Lovato thing. What's like, I say, oh, well, I'm going to go to her concert. I mean, I'm going to their concert. I'm going to them concert. I really like when
somebody you're talking to who doesn't know is like, oh, it's a group? Is it a band? No, it's one.
It's them. And it's like, again, from elementary school to, like, I'm 39 now. Like, that's a lot of years to all of a sudden be like, okay, everything you learn about how language works and how you're supposed to structure things, you need to change all that. Everything. You don't mess it up, because if you do mess it up one time, you're out. Like,
oh, and then it's not even just that, because you can make up your own pronouns. Case in point, the Wachowskis. I love The Matrix. Talk about The Matrix all the time. The Matrix was written, directed by the Wachowski brothers at the time The Matrix came out. Now, first, one of them decided to change genders, and then now it was a man and a woman, and they were like, so they're not the brothers anymore, so what are they? They decided they're the Wachowski Starship, and that is their official pronouns, is Starship. So
I know that.
At this point, the other one has also transitioned, from what I understand. I haven't followed up on this.
That is true. They both have, yes.
So if they both transition, are they still a Starship? Do we call them sisters now? When we refer to who directed The Matrix, was that the Starship or was that the brothers? Is there a point in time where we have to switch which pronoun we use based on what we are at the time?
I think about, like, only because, I heard Tupac's All About You, and one of the lines that one of the other rappers in the song says, like, I'm running faster like Bruce Jenner. Is that now an offensive lyric to sing because it's now Caitlyn Jenner? Or can we be like, there's a cutoff for when this actually was okay to call him that still?
Well, not only that, because the Olympic medals have Bruce's name. They don't have Caitlyn's name. Yeah. So are those still her medals? Like,
is all of Ellen Page's movies now irrelevant in terms of calling her that for those previous movies? Because the credits have not changed. They're not going to go back and change the credits to be like, oh, this was actually Elliot Page.
And are they offensive now? What's your IMDb look like? Do you have to get a new IMDb?
Yeah.
There's
And funny enough, I think I heard he's
questions.
on this he's on a show now called The Umbrella Academy. And what I heard is even though he transitioned, he said for season 2 he's still going to be uh, portraying a woman. Mind blown about that? Like, oh, so trans people can actually still play female characters if they're a trans man. That's a whole different conversation altogether too. Like that's a lot to take in. You know, is that
So,
now considered
so
alien dressing in drag?
well, oh wow, jeez. What I was gonna say, let's say that the show got mad about it and recast the character, right?
Mhm.
Would that be a trans issue? Would that be a women's rights issue? Would that be a fight that they have to fight out? Would the women be like, this role is for a woman, so it should be played by a woman? You chose not to be a woman anymore, so therefore you shouldn't be able to play this role.
Hey
Non-woman.
guys, we're not making fun of all. These are legit questions because like these are questions we don't know the answers to. Like how does the trans community talk about these kind of things, or when they see these things happening, how do they then identify the person and the parts that they're playing and what they're doing based on the changes that they've made?
No, but for real, okay, by this same thing. So now a trans woman can decide that role should be played by a woman. I want to play that role, so I'm going to sue because that's no longer a woman. That's now a man that's playing that role.
Mm,
That's where I'm coming from with it. So, like, if a woman who is identifying as a woman wants that role, can they say that's discrimination?
maybe.
And I'm just like, it. That's why it's like it gets so complicated. The more we bend the rules and change the words, the problem is we're now making these legal issues. There's lawsuits. We're talking about Congress. We're talking about laws being put into place to change the definition of words. It, it's now being battled out in the court of law. That's such an extreme level for this to go to. But it's like because of the conflict, it has to.
Mm.
And that's where I'm just like, it's going so far. Like, I don't know what to do with all this. And we just still trying to figure it out because it then becomes dangerous because you say the wrong thing and there's a legal ramification for it.
Mm.
So it's just like, okay, I want to be an ally, but while I'm in this realm, I slipped and called somebody the wrong gender. So now I'm the enemy when I was trying to be an ally. I don't want to be an ally because it's dangerous. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm,
Right.
just, I'm
Titty Warren.
Much as some people might insist that language isn't that important and that forcing people to go against what they know to be true in the form of something that some people might consider to be not that important, like calling a man a woman, it actually is a massive deal. The border of language is the border of our minds. Language is how we express ourselves and how we interact with each other. And when we allow other people to control our language, we're allowing them to control us, to control what we say, and with enough work, to also control what we think. Not to be cliche, but in order to illustrate the importance of language in general, I'm going to make a reference to 1984 because the author George Orwell, he fully understood the importance of language and how by allowing our language to be controlled, it would pave the way for allowing our thoughts to be controlled. Orwell believed that totalitarianism and the corruption of language were connected. He focused especially on political language where you distorted events and concepts by calling them something else. One of Orwell's most important messages in 1984 is that language is of central importance to human thought because it structures and limits the ideas that individuals are capable of formulating and expressing. If control of language was centralized in a political agency, Orwell proposes, such an agency could possibly alter the very structure of language to make it impossible to even conceive of disobedient or rebellious thoughts, because there would be no words with which to think them.
You know, it's funny. When I was hearing that, I was thinking about the fact that right now in Congress, the Republicans and Democrats are trying to start a commission about the January 6th insurrection and how the Republicans are so defiantly trying to say it wasn't an insurrection. And it's like, what is so important about that word that they're fighting over whether it should be used or not? It's because those words have consequences. If it's not an insurrection, it's not that serious. If it's an insurrection, it means we need to really figure out what this was because it was detrimental to our democracy and a threat to it. So when people say like, oh, it shouldn't matter if if you use man, woman, female, this is like all those things, those words are there for a reason, and to not use them can have consequences. But I'm curious, like, what kind of consequences could those have if you're trying to say these words don't matter or trying to redefine them in a way that it includes everybody in a certain like box or whatever?
it just it comes down to when you take the power out of words, or the definition, I say, out of words, it's an attempt to take the power out of them. And you're trying to either redirect the narrative, you're trying to redirect the consequences, and just kind of make it a different thing. So, like what you're saying about the insurrection, that's a powerful word. That's an uprising. That's people upset about. Versus if you called it, I don't know, a disturbance. The disturbance, or the the situation. It's a much less powerful feeling that's attached to it. So it comes back to history, looking back at it, or other countries on like the grand political scale. When you're sitting there, she's talking about George Orwell, 1984. I recently read Animal Farm.
Okay.
Which was mind blowing, to be honest with you. Simply, they played word games to change the narrative of history. And it was a big thing about, there was one of the characters, they were basically, it was pigs on a farm that took over from the humans and then became the humans, is kind of the gist of it. Like they kept becoming more and more corrupt until they became like what they overthrew. And part of the way they did that was they convinced the other animals that they were necessary, that they were more vital, so that they could have certain privileges. That initially, when all the animals were equal, they were like, oh, these things are banned because that's what the bad people did. And they were like, well, it's necessary for us because we're, in a different position. So what we're going to say, so they would say stuff like, yeah, all animals are equal, but we're just more equal. What? Or there was like a situation where they were kind of had a battle, and one of the pigs did this heroic act. And then there was a political situation, and he ends up getting kicked out of the place. And so suddenly, every time they went back and talked about it, they changed the narrative. They were like, oh, yeah, he didn't do that. The other guy did that. And they were like, no, I was there. I saw it. No, that's not what happened. You're mistaken. And over time, they kept that narrative going for so long that they changed the story to where they were like, no, he's the villain. He's the one that caused all of this. It's really his fault. He's evil, and he's the hero because he's still here and he's not here to defend himself. So we're going to rechange the story. So that's what's happening with all this, where if we can change the way we talk about things, we change the perception of them. Therefore, it's not what you thought it was something else. So that's not an insurrection. That was just a disturbance, or that was just a revival, or a protest. Now it's a positive thing because they were just protesting. No, they stormed the government. Like, what are you talking about? But it's like, no, that's not what it was. It was something different. They were the heroes.
Regular history tour. It was like, whatever. We brought a bunch of friends with them.
So if we can paint them as the heroes, it's a different story. And that's where it's just like, it gets confusing. But that's what the redefining. What we're trying to do with this is almost destroy definition. And I don't know where that goes. Like, if nothing means nothing, or if it's so blended it doesn't mean anything anymore, it's just like, how do you even communicate at that point? How do you talk to somebody? Because it doesn't make sense. And however you say it is the wrong way to say it. That's really what it is. It's basically, I can now say whatever you say is wrong.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. If I confuse it enough, then I can use it against you. Anything you say can and will be used against you.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the goal of this.
Well, part of it feels too like, so I think about the whole, like, trans women are women. It's like, we already have a definition of what woman is. The trans part's added on because it's signifying that this person was not necessarily born with that XY chromosome, and now they are identifying as such. And so they've transitioned their lives and themselves to be in more of that feminine realm. But I think it takes away from them from the definition of women who are actually born women, because they had an experience that growing up as natural born women that trans women did not have. And to me, it takes away from that by saying, well, now these trans women, they're also like actual women. It's like, but they didn't have that life experience that these women had about a number of things that women go through, Like, I find, and same thing with trans men. Like, I find it like them being so insulted by that definition. I'm like, I don't understand why you don't understand what people are saying that for. Like, they're not saying you're less of, they're just saying you're not the same. And not being the same is not a bad thing.
But it's seen as that. It's seen as, oh, well, there's still this risk of I'll have to face the consequences of the judgment, essentially. I just thought about another scenario where this kind of comes into play with we were talking about on one of the previous shows. My brother was here and we had him as a guest, but he's my brother-in-law, right? But in our years knowing each other, we've become really close, and we just decided, yeah, no, it's just my brother. Like, we don't have to put all the qualifiers on it, right? That's just my bro. And so it was cool with us because we understood the scenario. But then let's say I'm having a conversation with somebody like, oh yes, and my brother came on the show. Oh yeah, cool. That's really cool. Like, yeah, so I remember, yeah, him and my sister and their kids. What? Your brother and your sister have kids. At this point, it's necessary to put a qualifier. Because if I don't say my brother-in-law is married to my sister and that's gonna get real weird real quick. So that's where I'm like,
that's true. Wow, I
it's
just thought about that part too.
Bad that he's my brother-in-law. That's not a negative. It's just a part of the definition that now helps me to communicate to other people. So that's where I'm like, that's what this should be.
Because you going to like say a guy friend of yours and a guy friend is like, hey man, I'm single, I want to meet somebody, and you're like, hey, I got this really awesome woman you should meet. And then you set them up and they start doing something in the bedroom, like, wait, this woman's got stuff down there. What's going on? Oh, it's a trans woman. But you didn't tell me that, but it's a woman. Women are women.
So here's the thing with that. If we take the judgment away, then you can say that up front. Like, oh yeah, I'm single, I'm looking for somebody. And it's like, okay, well, hey, look, I know this woman, she's a trans woman. I think y'all would get along. Maybe y'all should try it out. At that point, that person has the option to say, oh, no, or you know what?
But that
let's see.
That would mean both taking away the stigma of a trans woman being a trans woman, and also the stigma of that guy like looking at him and saying you'd be cool with the trans woman thinking, and him thinking like, why do I look like the kind of guy that would date a trans person? Like, that has to be taken away too as a stigma.
That's what I'm saying. It's got to be the judgment on both sides has to be gone for that conversation to happen. Because there's people out there who are perfectly happy in scenarios like that. But they had to both get over all of the stigmas and all of the traumas and all the negatives that come along with it to find that this is their happiness. That's their partner, and they cool with it. But like, it's the same scenario. You go out, I could go out this weekend and meet somebody and hit it off with them and have a great conversation and everything is cool. And then, okay, at some point, a sexual conversation needs to happen if things are leading towards a sexual relationship. So at some point, this has to happen. So I think where a lot of people ran into issue is they waited too long to have that conversation. And so the person's like, yo, you should have told me this before all this was invested. And you got to understand that. That's crucial. But at the same time, you got to understand this person was nervous to do that because a lot of negative can come from having that conversation. So it's sketchy. So that's why I'm like, we got to get rid of the stereotypes and the negative judgments in order to work this out. As long as that's there, we're going to have these weird issues coming up.
Sure.
But like, so the scenario you said, if you was like, hey, Joe, look, I know you looking, let me introduce you to somebody. Okay, cool. I'm over here thinking that we're on the same page with what we're saying. So when you say you're introducing me to a woman, my natural thinking is we've always interacted with women who were natural women who we called women. Yeah. So if you don't tell me that we've changed this conversation, I'm not going to think that that's what we're doing.
Right.
So somebody has to say it. Either it's you as the friend or when the meeting happens. Because I'm like, I've run into people who you can't tell. And most people, you should be able to see.
Like in Atlanta, California, definitely Vegas, like people out and about and will not tell you nothing when you first meet them.
And I'm like, at one point I was like, okay, maybe I'm tripping. It was somebody on a dating site. I actually showed my friends like, oh, look, this is somebody I met on a site. And, you know, I was thinking about talking to him. What do you think? And they would look through the profile like, yeah, okay, dude, no, what's up? You should definitely talk to her. And then on the profile, they'd be like trans. And they're like, what? Because you couldn't tell. There was no indication until you saw it. And you were like, but I've seen people in person that I knew were men who pulled it off between makeup and surgeries and push-up, pull-up stuff and all of the different elements that you can do.
I was on set with this girl for a few years that I was like, she was an Asian girl, and I was like she just full on had the voice down, this and that. And then it wasn't until we became Facebook friends and then I started seeing the stuff she was posting. I was like, oh wait, she's actually she's a trans woman. I couldn't tell.
So I'm like, well, there's a lot of people, like I said, I don't know I could pull it off. Just my physicality, I don't think I'd be very convincing. However, there are people who are flawlessly living the life on the other side. It's the same way with black people racially. There's black people who can pass as white. There's white people who can pass as black. I don't think I could pass as a white man. I don't think I could physically pull it off.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a lot of work to get there. So that being said, this works better for certain people than for others. So if you are in that situation, because if we being 100 about it, there's some other questions. So, okay, let's take the kids thing off the table. If you're not worried about having kids, okay, is this person transitioned or not? So if I'm introducing you to a woman for you to date, okay, this is a trans woman, born a man, is now a woman. My next question would be, okay, what stage of transition are we in?
If at all, yeah.
Because at that point, once again, we're dealing with a sexual nature. We're now dealing with what pieces are on the board.
Yep. And then also that, like, if we're going towards like the whole thing of like people being who they want to be, what if you're a trans woman that wants to grow a beard out or wants to like still wear cologne or wants to do other things that I would consider masculine leaning?
Well, that's the thing. That's why there's the whole thing of sexuality and gender, which are two different things. So that was the whole thing I was saying with the one. This was a person who was born a man who transitioned into being a woman who was a lesbian, but then she was like, I also don't feel like I'm gender normative as a woman. I feel like I'm gender neutral or non-binary. So there's days I want to dress more masculine. Okay, so now I don't know what? All right, so what category do you put this person in? And they're like, stop trying to put me in a category.
And it's hard because like they're thinking like, well, people should just like me as I am, but like realistically, most people work best on being able to categorize somebody. Okay, is this person leaning this way or that way? What expression do they have that's going to portray what I'm going to be attracted to? And if it's like, well, some days I'll be masculine, I'll be feminine leaning like you want me to, but other days might be masculine, and you got to just deal with that. It's like most people are going to be like, but I only want like this category. I don't want to like have multiple choice days.
So the reality of it is you got to find somebody who's open to that. And the hard part is there's not a lot. You're going to run into a lot of people who want a certain thing. But you know what? That's dating. Because if you ask
at large,
most men, that's what they deal with every day. Regardless. They're like, okay, well, this is what I would like. This is who I am. And this is who I want to like me. And women are like, well, you just got to deal with rejection. Okay, that's just a part of life. If you're a man. But if you're a man who decides to be a woman, you can now demand that the man like you because you're a woman now. But if you're a man, you can't demand a woman like you.
Right.
Or you're going to jail.
You definitely can't be turning away trans women. How dare you?
Damn. So yeah, once again, man should be a trans woman who's a lesbian. That way you can date whoever you want.
All right, continuing on.
Language aside, something else that I think is worth considering is where this push to redefine gender first originated. And I recently stumbled across a very interesting video which I think answers this question quite well. Before I play the video, however, I just want to point out that the person in this video uses the acronym TERF. And for those who don't know, TERF is an acronym for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. A lot of people refer to J.K. Rowling as a TERF because while she supports transgender rights, she also believes in biological sex. J.K. Rowling doesn't believe that a man who dresses as or who medically transitions into a woman is in fact a biological woman, and rightly so. But now for the video.
Before I get some TERFs up in my comment sections being like, women means adult human female. First of all, fuck you. Second of all, y'all don't even know your feminist history. Second wave feminism was about relieving women from their reproductive roles and duties. It's regressive to reclaim female as this like fucking end all be all term for what womanhood is. Like, literally know your history. Feminism was not about that. Feminism was about alleviating these gender roles and gender duties based on reproductive capability. It was about getting rid of it. And that's why feminism belongs to us queers and trans people now, because it begat us. So fuck off.
Personally, I fully agree with this video.
I couldn't tell, honestly, when I first watched it, I couldn't tell if she was for or against people using the term female or not, or who should use it. I was really confused.
The one in the video, the other video?
Yeah.
So what I gathered from that, because it was a little confusing for a second, but basically the whole feminist movement was to say there shouldn't be a difference. We can do everything a man can do, and you shouldn't treat us differently because we're women. So it's not based on my ability to have children. It's not based on this. If I want to go out and work, if I want to, be on a sports team, I can do anything, you can do better. That was the feminist agenda from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So what this person was saying is, okay, if that's the agenda, stick with that agenda. What happened was there were men who wanted to be more feminine, who took that role on. You don't want the role, we're going to take it. So they were like, this is ours now. You have your equality and we'll be the women. Which was like, that's deep. Because you kind of, like, how do you argue with that? Like, okay, no, we're agreeing with you. You can be as masculine as you want. And that kind of goes back to our dating conversation of the quote unquote high value men wanting more feminine women and women wanting to be more career minded and, all these things that were traditionally masculine, wondering why these men aren't looking for that. So it goes back to this movement. And that's kind of what her video is about, is like, yeah, women kind of started this whole thing. And now it's coming back to not be an advantage to them. It's just getting weird, but they're like, we got it now. So go live what you said you wanted. Kind of what she was saying. Yeah. I didn't get the preferred pronoun from the last video. I'm sorry if
I couldn't tell if that was, or what that person was identifying as. Just, I mean, it looked, I can't, that's the thing. It gets dicey because you can't always tell.
It's rude because, like, if I'm like, oh, can we get like name tags? Then like you're being a jerk, but
right.
There's some utility to it. Like,
I'm like realistically, like I'm listening to vocal inflections and I'm looking at hair, and I'm like, between these two things, it could be either or. And again, that's fine, but don't get mad at me if I'm like, I can't tell what you're trying to identify as. Please help me.
But it's not even based on what's the word? It's not based on how you dress, because there's non-binary. That's what I'm saying. So it's like, you can't, it's basically saying stop believing what your eyes tell you, what you've been conditioned for your eyes to tell you about male versus female. You have to ignore that and identify me as what I decide I am, regardless of the signals I'm naturally giving off to you. Because I can switch either day, but who I feel like I am inside doesn't change. And that's what you have to recognize me as. Yeah. And so the whole thing is, okay, then you need to give me a way to do that. And that's where we're kind of hitting this disconnect of, yeah, I don't know how to identify that without some type of label. You can choose your label, but then you have to let me see that label. Yes. So at this point, I guess it's your social media profile will tell us your pronouns. So then you need to have a phone with your profile on your shirt right here that tells us. And then, okay, no problem. But if I just have to look at, like, when I look at the screen now, I see a woman. If she was like, I'm not a woman, I'm a man, nothing about you tells me that.
Right.
And so the previous screen, I'm getting both. There's things that tell my brain this is a man. There's things that tell my brain this is someone who identifies as female. And then they're like, well, no, I'm Z or Zer. And I keep going back to that one because that's a legitimate one.
No, and I've heard that thing of like, the mind can't handle two conflicting thoughts. When you see somebody that's like, they sound like this, they look like this, they're identifying as this, your brain literally just, it's like that weird itch in your head. It's just like, I just need to know a thing. And it's like, none of that's helping.
And then we've got the whole non-binary thing, which is like, I don't want to be either. I don't want to be masculine or feminine. So what do I call you? That's where these other pronouns came about. But then it's like, okay, what about the people who decided they want to switch between the two? Yeah. There's people who want to dress masculine and want to dress feminine, and they go extreme.
Well, I always think about the medical stats, but like, let's say say you're you're a trans man, but not that you decided to keep your vaginal parts, and now you have a vaginal issue. You got to go to the medical office, and they're saying, "Oh, she needs to get on the gurney." No, I'm sorry, I'm actually they. I'm sorry, what? Like, but in order to be able to help you best, we have to know that you're based on your female lady parts, that we're going to treat you in a way that we would normally treat females for this particular condition. Are you going to feel offended now because we have to treat you in that way, even though you are trying to identify something else?
And that's a situation where that's something you got to work out, because can't nobody else. Let's think about being offended. You are the only person who can determine what you are offended by. So you can't make the world adjust to your offense, if that makes sense. That's difficult because you want to make people not offend you. And it's really one of the hardest lessons for people to go through. But you really have to kind of be like, okay, either I'm going to be offended all the time, or I'm going to resolve this to where it doesn't offend me. And that is something I can say I relate to, even on the African American level with the N word, because that's what that whole process was about. You go back to Richard Pryor, and he was saying, I don't want this word to be offensive anymore. So what I want to do is normalize it. I want to use it so much that it takes the sting out of it. So I'm gonna say it all day, every day. And he's quoted with that. You can go back and watch some of his stand-up specials where he says that.
Then he also went to Africa, and somebody told
him,
yeah. Right.
He got to later on in his life and was like, I messed up. That's not what happened. All I did was make this concept, this offensive theme, become so everyday that it's all around. Like, it was inspired by his Africa trip. He was like, I went there and I didn't see any niggas. That's not what's here. It was like, it had a definition that he couldn't redefine after all of that effort. But you know, now it's out there. Now it's every day. Now people calling themselves and each other and other people calling it, and it's just so everywhere. But there's still that underlying connotation that some people will always hear.
Yep.
And so it may have worked for like later generations.
Well, because I think about, like, it was used a lot in our music growing up, and I still feel some kind of way when it gets called to me by that, or if I even hear it in certain songs by certain artists, I'm like, it still feels kind of So it didn't necessarily help. It's just like, oh, we just hear it now, so it's not as offending, but it still doesn't take away the fact that when I hear it, my first thought is like, oh, he said the fact that they blank it out on edited versions should tell you something. Like,
do they? I usually still hear it.
No, they blank it out, yeah. Or even like on radio and stuff like that, they blank out.
Radio, yeah, but like a parental advisory album, it's there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I bought I had to go buy a lot of them albums. Like the N-word was either changed. Some artists re-recorded to be like bro or whatever. Or
for the radio, yeah.
Or no, I'm not saying for the actual albums themselves, or it would just be like scratched out altogether. Yeah, I bought a lot of like Busta Rhymes albums, LL Cool J's, like all those people. They would have it blanked out.
I don't remember those.
But that's showing that's just saying to say like that, you know, whether it was edited out for the album for the radio, it's still saying on a societal level, this is still a thing, whether we try to define it or not. So to try to be like, well, we're going to define the word women as like all women. Realistically, when women hear that, they might not think, oh, I'm going to lump trans women into that category, because they're going to be like, at one point in time, they weren't this word.
Well, even with that, it comes down to, okay, all it really does is now mean I have to ask more questions within the category. So let's say we accept as a society that trans women are women unquestionably. There's no differentiation. We just say it as it's all one thing.
Okay.
Once you get back to your doctor example. So you're a gynecologist. And this person is so convinced that they're a woman that they go to a gynecologist. There's going to be some things that are going to be different regardless of levels of surgical transitioning, to where the gynecologist is like,
I have
questions. I'm going to need to know some stuff because I can't do my normal job.
Right.
The way I normally do my job based on the factors in front of me. So.
And also to the fact, like, okay, a trans woman going to a gynecologist, well, a trans woman that still kept her original parts, the package, if you will, realistically is probably not going to go to a gynecologist. Why? Because on some level, they still know that would not be an appropriate place for them to go. Why? Because they're not fully an actual woman. They're a trans woman, which is fine, but that's not going to make them be like, I'm a full woman, I'm going to go to a gynecologist now.
Because that's the thing. Like, let's go back to Caitlyn Jenner. Let's say Caitlyn starts, you know, whatever surgical level has gone to. As we get older, we start dealing with medical issues. There may be a situation where now he's dealing with some prostate issues, or she's dealing with prostate issues.
Yeah.
That's not a woman's issue. Women don't have prostate issues because they don't have prostate. So at some point you have
to define now, like, oh, like all women can include women that also have prostates, just like all men can now include women that can get men that can get pregnant.
So now we got to retrain all the doctors.
Well, that's why I said in the video, oh, we got to change the. And I'm just like, as much stress as the doctor's under, the last thing I want to do in the course of a surgery is be like, oh wait, I got to change all these pronouns now while I'm trying to save this person's life. Like, that's really
because the chart is a legal document, so this person can now sue the doctor for mislabeling them on their chart. So the doctor referred to me as he on my prostate exam, and I'm offended.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you can sue the doctor who, all right, like, I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot. At some point, you kind of just gotta like go back to the inward thing. While on a society level, there was still a level of this is what it is and this is what it isn't. There are people who are no longer offended by the word.
Mhm.
So there's people who will always be offended by it. And that's why on a societal level, it still has to be censored. It still has its limitations.
Yeah.
But there are people who decided that word doesn't offend me. And so that's where I'm like, it still kind of comes down to your individual choice of, even if you are offended, what level do you take that to?
Mm.
And I've had to face that where, let's say I'm in a professional setting and somebody uses this word to refer to me in a negative manner.
Yeah.
And okay, let's say I have every right to be offended. Do I punch him in the face?
Oh, I always think back to I always think back to our classic clashing with the Russian people at the hotel.
Why you bringing up old stuff? Why are you being specific about it? Just say the people.
I'm just saying, these people at the hotel that we walked in, and the first thing they called us was the N-word, and we looking around like they got like, I don't know if they had guns there, but they had some stuff there. They were drunk off their bus, and we looked to the right, and they had like a TV that was smashed in. We were like, this is not the time to have that argument. This is not the time to like have that discussion. Like, these are the people that are probably going to gel with this discussion we're going to have with them about calling us the N-word. So we don't just be like whatever. But yeah,
it's like
you
whatever
know when.
was definitely tapered by the scenario. The
Yeah.
whole outnumbered and outgunned. Like, yeah, this isn't going to be the best time to have a deep discussion about how offensive the N-word is. Let's talk about it when we recap this story later. How about that?
Or on breakfast, not drunk, it'd be great.
But there's people who, once again, they'll decide they're going to die on that hill. You're not going to call me that word. I don't care if there's 50 of you with machine guns pointed at me. That's not something you're going to call me. And I mean, that's your prerogative. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I guess we respect your commitment to changing the perceptions of people. But so that's the whole thing. It's just like, if you're offended, what level do you take the offense to? What level do other authorities need to get involved to protect your level of offense?
Yeah.
And to what level do you allow some kind of grace or learning curve to people who are trying and just struggling with it? You know what I mean? So that's kind of what this conversation is to me.
All right, continuing on.
How long is this video?
Realize it or not, in fighting to redefine traditional gender roles, they were the ones who took the very first step towards a society in which no significant borders between men and women are acknowledged, and men and women are considered to be basically the same to the point that they are interchangeable. While feminism might have claimed to simply be fighting for equal rights between men and women, the various waves of feminism went far beyond that, with many women choosing to fully usurp the male role, claiming that women are capable of absolutely everything that men are, and that aside from women needing men's sperm to procreate, the world would be exactly the same if men didn't exist. And
I hate that argument so much too. The whole like, oh, we can do whatever you guys do, and patriarchy this, and we can take over, we can do these things, and it's like, it's funny because at the same time they want us to respect their position in the world and what they're trying to go for and what their dreams and stuff are and how they function and whatnot. But I always feel like we get that same grace. But that's different from the trans thing. That's just a personal thing. But yeah. Anyway.
So now, naturally, many men are doing the exact same thing and are choosing to usurp the female role. Pandora's box has been opened, so to speak, and at the end of this road, we're going to find ourselves in a society in which there are zero borders between men and women. Men and women will be considered exactly the same. But
some would argue that that's a good thing. Is that a good thing, a bad thing, a neutral thing? Like,
I don't see how it's a good thing, because there's a beauty and there's a necessity in the variation. And the more we try to erase it, it just kind of like leaves us without that the difference. Like, if there's no difference, then what's the difference?
I kind of feel the same way about when people say, oh, like I don't see race, I don't see color. It's like you're taking away all the things that those races and colors bring to existence by saying we're just all the same, because we're not. Latinos have different culture, Asians have different culture, and they bring different foods, different celebrations, all those things. So the same thing with like men and women. It's like I like the differences. And I do think there's a problem with like women's stuff being seen as weaker than guys and not as important. But I don't think that being a woman, like, and how they operate, is any less necessary or any less beautiful than the way the guys do.
I think that the real fight was for equal importance, and that it got shifted into the same thing. And that's where it got weird. Like, it's not the same, it's different. It's different for a reason. It should be equally valued, but it should still be something different. And so once again, the push got so intense to where it's like, no, there's no difference at all. Like she said, women should be the same as men and there should be no difference. And we've demonstrated on a few different levels that there is a clear difference. But we just decided that we're not going to acknowledge that and still push this narrative that, no, there's no difference. And we always go back to the dating thing. But we see it in the dating society, once again, where women are kind of rebelling against it, where they're like, look, we don't really want this to be the way things are. We kind of want the different gender roles, and we want the men to be men. And, there's a big push for like, oh, I don't want to like be equal and split bills with the man. I want a man that'll take care of me. I want a man that'll pay all the bills. I want a man to make the decisions. And like a lot of the dating advice that's coming out now for men is lean more into these traditionally masculine roles to be more attractive to women. But it's the same feminist agenda that kind of made that demonized in the first place, and was like, no, women, we need to stand up on our own 2 feet, and we don't need men, and we're going to be the breadwinners and career women, and we're going to be the ones to do all this stuff.
And also, all this stuff being done is by if all these things that men are doing are furthering the patriarchy and are therefore toxic, and therefore you should be offended by them and not want them. So if you're staying at home as a stay-at-home mother, that's because the man's oppressing you to stay at home. If you're earning less than a guy, it's because they're oppressing you into certain types of jobs. You should want all the jobs and all the things, this and that. And then if you get in the process, like, women are still on average, what's what I'm looking for? They're looking up higher up. Hypergamy. They're hypergamous. So a woman making $200,000 a year is still looking at a guy that makes $100,000 as worthless because he's not making as much, even though it shouldn't matter because we should be equal, right? So just like
it's the whole thing of like, basically at the end of the day, I see it as there's been a push with women to be more masculine, to even the playing field of the masculinity that they felt was oppressing them. But then at the same time, they want a partner who's more masculine than they are. But then they want to compete to prove that they're not less than him. And it's just pushing the standard so off the charts, basically, where it's just like, nothing lines up anymore. It's just, okay, well, I want to be it's the whole have your cake and eat it too. It's the whole, I want to be a career woman, but I also want to be taken care of. I want to be independent, but I want to be taken care of. I want opposing things that I can't have by definition. So let's just take away definitions altogether.
Yeah.
Kind of it's confusing. It's confusing everybody who's in it, and nobody's winning. And it's just like, can we figure out some way for like everybody to just work with it? Like, can we all just get along? Can we just be happy? You know what I'm saying? Can you be happy, and then can you let me be happy, and then we both happy? Yeah. And that's it. I was going back to Will Smith with that. Like, I can't make you happy if you decide not to be happy. Right. So you be happy. That's it. Like, I give up. You be happy on your own, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna be happy. And if you want my happy to be a part of your happy, then cool. But like, I don't know what else to do at this point. Yeah. So it's just so many examples of all of this where you just like, but yeah, let's let her finish.
All right, let's finish up here.
Fact is, even if it's an upsetting fact, is that most people simply aren't the same in what they are and what they're capable of. Some men will never be able to accomplish what some other men can, and some women will never be able to accomplish what some other women can. And men and women certainly aren't just interchangeable in the sense that they can just accomplish everything that the opposite sex can, even if they have the exact same rights and opportunities. Men and women are very different, and not just men and women, a lot of people in general are very different. Despite the fact that the left is trying to make men and women the same to the point of interchangeability, they contradict themselves when they acknowledge differences among groups of people, using terms such as diversity, which they use not just in regard to ethnic groups, but men and women as well. For example, having a workplace with both men and women is considered diverse, or in other words, different. This definitely doesn't mean that some people or groups are superior over or better than others. Not at all. Every human, every soul is valuable, and having differences, different strengths and weaknesses and abilities, it's a beautiful thing, especially because in many cases our differences, such as those between men and women, are complementary. At the moment, the push to make absolutely everyone and everything the same is succeeding because we are allowing concepts like exclusivity to be interpreted as hateful. But exclusivity is not hateful. It's natural, it's healthy, and it's necessary for self-preservation. A marriage is exclusive between the husband and the wife. If the spouses agree to allow others into their marriage, it ceases to be a marriage, at least in the traditional sense of the marital institution. Or if you're a Catholic and you decide to welcome all religions into Catholicism, then Catholicism ceases to exist and it becomes a hodgepodge of every religion on earth. And this is unfortunately what's happening right now to men and women. If men and women aren't exclusive groups, if men can be women and women can be men, then it doesn't really mean anything at all to be a man or a woman, and we might as well just toss out the concept of men and women altogether.
And some people would actually be cool with that. Like, hey, there should be no gender at all. It should just be everybody's just called human, and then it's a wrap. And I think they, again, a lot of the nuances we talked about in terms of like the workplace thing, in terms of the medical stuff, I think by doing that, it gets rid of a lot of that stuff, which people are kind of like, oh, but still, it shouldn't matter. And yeah.
I'm just like, she's right.
Oh, the Olympic part too. Okay, yeah, this is, oh, okay.
Comes a woman beats out all of the biological women in a specific sport, will deny the fact that it's because as a biological male he's usually stronger and faster. We'll just say it's because the biological woman didn't train hard enough. Or when a woman who becomes and gives birth will deny the fact that it's because only biological women can give birth. We'll just say it's because men can get pregnant too. Groups aren't exclusive in order to be.
I don't think I can get pregnant. I'm not convinced that I can get pregnant, regardless of what labels people put on. If I decide to be a woman, I don't think I can be pregnant. I'm a man, and men can be pregnant. I still don't think I can be pregnant.
But to a point, it's like, that's what goes back to the thing about exclusions. Like people think that exclusion means like you're discriminating, and it's like no. Just because I'm saying you're a trans man, it means that you can do stuff as a trans man that I, as a natural born man, cannot do. I cannot get pregnant. I cannot have periods. I don't have the same emotional structure that you may have. And again, that's totally fine. You can still be defined. You can still be defining yourself as a masculine person, but you being a full out and about man is not something I'm going to commit to when I know that your experience is different from mine. And that difference does not make you less of, it just means you're not same as.
I feel like that's the one area that could be argued for, the emotional thing. Like, I think that's where it stems from. Like the emotional structure, the mentality, the personality. I think that's what is the thing that people are saying, oh, I feel like I'm the other thing.
Okay.
But that comes down to, that is something that is a spectrum, and people do fall on different lines of the spectrum. And then you have where traditionally or typically men fall on this side and women fall on this side. But with that being said, there are men who are on the other side of that and women who are on the other side of it. And so instead of that being just considered normal, society is like, no, that's wrong. So those people are like, okay, well, maybe I'm the other one. So if I'm a man, but I'm really emotional, maybe I'm really a woman, because women are more emotional than men. So, or if I'm a woman who doesn't have emotions like that, or thinks more logically, or just likes traditionally masculine things, then maybe I should just be a man. It's like, why you can just be that. Like it's still okay to be a man who's emotional. It's still okay to be a woman who's not emotional or who's logical and structured, who likes to, smoke cigars and shoot guns. Like, that's fine. Robin Scherbatsky, in case you didn't catch the reference.
Yeah.
But Like she never had to be a man. She could just be a woman. And like Ted was super emotional. How I Met Your Mother, if anybody's not following, great show.
No.
Ted was a dude. He did all the traditionally feminine things that women, all the mistakes women make in dating, Ted would do. And he was having trouble. He would tell people he loved them on the first date. Super emotional man. But he was never like, I feel like I'm a woman now. He was just a man who was too emotional. And he dated Robin. And he was like in love with Robin, but Robin was like super masculine woman most of the time. And it was like I liked how they did that because they still got to be who they were. You know what I mean?
I was like, interestingly though, him being emotional did at times play against like how Robin felt about him for, you know, being a little too there or being too caring and stuff like that. It's like, even in that scenario, it's still like the woman's still like, whoa, you're doing too much of a girl, dude. Like, because she ended up dating Barney for a lot of years, who was like the over masculine guy. And then funny enough, they broke up. He started acting more feminine energied as well.
Well, that's the thing too, because he started off more feminine, quote
I'm
unquote.
saying Barney.
Yeah, I'm saying Barney.
Okay.
His backstory when he was Mr. Kumbaya, want to go to build the homes for the kids in whatever third world, like that Barney.
Yeah.
Then he basically, his girlfriend was taken by the hyper masculine man. And that's when he decided, oh, I need to be more masculine. And he switched into this super hyper masculine man. And he was just like, let me lean into the stereotype. And then all of a sudden he was more attractive to women. And it's that same kind of concept where you're just like, okay, well, what works? And what are the motivations? Honestly.
And it's also showing too, like those things, defining yourself in those things helps you better to attract somebody, in part because they can categorize you as a certain energy, a certain type of person, whatever.
And that kind of goes back to the conversation earlier about lesbian women who become more masculine because they're trying to attract feminine women. So feminine women want to be around masculine acting partner.
Yes.
So a woman who's interested in women is like, okay, if I act more masculine, then these women will want me. Okay, cool. Let me lean into that.
Because we've definitely met female women who have dated more masculine butch lesbian women and then broken up with them and then gotten with a guy who was also more masculine and or showing that masculine energy. So it's like, it didn't even matter to them if it was a woman or a man. It was just the fact that they want that energy of the masculine characteristic there. And it just so happened a woman showed it first, but then they found a guy that did the same thing. Was like, okay, I'll go with the guy now.
Or they'll even do the opposite, where they'll be with guys who they don't feel are masculine enough and then end up going with a woman who's hyper masculine because they got more of what they were looking for from that woman. Like, it's, at the end of the day, they were looking for that masculine energy. So if your motivation is finding a partner, then you need to exude what you feel that partner, the partner you want, you have to exude what they want.
Yeah.
And so that's the lesson in all of it. But at the same time, it's, are you true to who you are? And so if you go too far away from who you are, then that's when you have the whole, oh, well, 10 years down the line, I'm changing to a different person because that's who I really always was. Like, it's just, I don't know where to balance it.
Sure. Yeah.
But I will say at the end of the day, a lot of the control and the power of how this goes is in the hands of women.
How so?
Well, she's talking about how women were determining how women were pushing the agenda to take away the differences in the genders on that side of things, which kind of created this gap for trans men to take over the feminine role. The other one is the selection of sexual partners. The choice is really the woman's choice. Women decide who they sleep with. And people could say, oh, well, men this and men that. Once again, we have this small group of alpha men, quote unquote, or high value men who seem to be the ones who get to select and play with different partners. But the reason for that is because that's who the majority of women are choosing to be with in the first place. The women gave them that power by selecting them as the preferred mate. So the reason they can choose between whatever woman they want is because all the women want them initially. Whereas a man who the women don't want doesn't have that power, doesn't have that choice. So it's not the men who have the power. It's the women gave certain men the power, which initially is still the women's power.
Right.
So that's where I'm like, all of this really it's in the hands of women to decide where all of this goes. Um, and they have to accept that. They have to own it, because there's still this whole mentality of, well, men and patriarchy and men decide this and men decide that. So until women accept it and start kind of making more deliberate decisions with it, it's kind of just going to be all over the place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's where I was coming from with that. Like, just women's choices of mates drive a lot of the gender discussion, for being real.
Yeah, it's very
Like,
true.
men aren't as selective, so to speak, which sounds terrible to say, but it's kind of like, I mean, men are like, look, I just need somebody
Yeah.
who's,
But
enough for what I need. I don't need the best of the best. I need somebody cool.
Yeah, that's true. But I also find it interesting, like, because I've learned that people's realities are usually based on how they experience things. So because a lot of women experience like, oh, they just have an abundance of choice, I think a lot of them assume that men also have an abundance of choice and can sleep with whoever, whenever. And it's like, but they're judging it based on the fact that they can do that. We don't really have that. Unless that even that 10 to 15%, if they put their profile on a dating app or whatever, they might get like a man that has like all the stats might get like 50 messages day one. Well, a woman with that same qualifying terms like looks like that, 150 messages first day, still getting more than a guy would. So the experience is still not the same, even with the guys that are in that 10 to 15%. But they don't see that. They only see from their experience and assume it must be the same for us, and it is definitely not.
That goes back to the narrative of, well, men have all the advantages and women are the underdogs. So in whatever category we're talking about, I just assume that I'm the underdog and you have all the advantages because you're a man. And we don't have to look at facts and figures. We don't have to do any research. We just know that that's how life works. Because that's the story.
Very true.
And how dare these men try to whine and cry about it? Just lean into your patriarchy.
Yeah, it's like, and it's a lot. It's almost done here. Here we go.
Maliciously rejecting others. Groups are exclusive both as an act of self-preservation and in defense of societal order. A societal order that's only going to survive so long as we heed reality. And reality, unfortunately, isn't something that we can just transform through feeling and desire, no matter how much we might want it to. Reality is immovable and unchangeable, and by ignoring reality, we create a breeding ground for chaos, one that we can already see has taken root in our society and will continue onward as long as we continue to place the things that we want to be true over truth itself. Thank you so much for watching.
So yeah, so that's the thing. I remember when Stephen Colbert had his old show on Comedy Central, and he used to have the word of the day, and the first word of the day he had was truthiness, which is basically saying, I believe something to be true, therefore it must be true in spite of whatever evidence is there. And I feel that's a lot of what's going on now with the trans argument, is the whole thing of like, well, we feel these things are true, therefore they must be true. And our reality is such that you must believe this reality that we have created for ourselves as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, unfortunately, there are things that'll come up that'll show at the end of the day, you were not born in this natural state. And like, you might be offended by it, but that doesn't take away the reality of what it actually is.
I don't know. Like, I don't know what else to add to that. It's just like, we're gonna lose touch with that reality at some point going down this road. And I don't know how to, other than saying, hey, let's not keep going down this road. Let's find a better way to resolve this.
Yeah.
Like, otherwise we're headed off a cliff. We're headed off a cliff of nothing means anything and nothing makes sense.
Yeah. I think we can have things that still mean the things that they mean. And whether we have to create new definitions or terms, or whether we have to say, look, if your reality is this term should be with you, that can be your reality, and I will be respectful of what that is, but I don't have to agree with it, and that be fine. I think that we could make some serious headway with that, because then more people would. If a guy could say, for example, okay, you're a trans female, so you're a trans female, I don't see you as a natural born female. I see you as a trans female, but I would still advocate for you. If that could be fine, that could be a start.
Here's the thing too. There's men that are like, I don't see you as a natural born female. I see you as a trans female, and I would still date you, or I would prefer to date you. There's those men out there.
Yeah.
The problem is we stigmatize those men and make them feel like they're wrong for wanting that. So that needs to be made okay. For one, you deciding you want to be someone transitioning needs to be made okay. And then y'all can meet each other and have fun and talk, and it's cool. Everybody happy, right? But as long as these things can't be accepted, then we got to redefine stuff and kind of force it on everybody. So that I don't feel rejected by everyone, I got to make everyone have to accept me. And then now it's just all twisted up.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm on. I feel like as far as the words, I think we need to stop trying to get rid of words or label words offensive. Like the existing reality should stay what it is.
Yeah.
And the best thing we have is the qualifiers. So, like you said, like, okay, this is a woman, this is a trans woman. That shouldn't be seen as offensive. That shouldn't be a negative. That should just be a qualifier, like brother-in-law. He's no less of a family member. It just gives a qualifier to help people understand the nature of their relationship.
Yeah.
So, you know, if someone decides to show up like, hey, this is my girlfriend, okay, great. And then you meet and you kind of like, something's different. Oh, yeah, she's trans. Okay. Now, if this is a family member, there may be some follow-up questions. Okay, I'm just curious. I want to know. So where are we with everything? But I'm like, before this was, hey, I'm a guy, this is my boyfriend. Okay, well, I may have some questions.
Yeah.
You're a family member, you're coming in my family.
Or even like, hey, like on this
I'm not
black,
negative. I don't hate you. I'm not rejecting you. Just let's talk
even
about
like things like I think about the race stuff, like, you know, I'm this black woman dating this white guy.
That was
Hey,
before that.
was the family. I have a few questions.
See what I'm
It's not
saying?
offensive. I just want to know what's going on, and then hope you guys are happy. But like, I definitely have some questions as to how this occurred.
And the questions, I feel like, is a part of normalizing. It's necessary for, I don't understand this because I've never been exposed to it. So, okay, help me get there. Help me understand you're not different from me. You're just living your life in a way that I'm not familiar with. And the more we can do that, the better. Like that's the key to solving racism. That's the key to solving sexism and gender stuff and all the rest of this is we got to understand each other. And that comes from having conversations. But as long as we're mad and offended and demonizing,
like pre-offended.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's like I say something and you find me offensive, and I got to find you offensive for finding me offensive. Like, it's a whole thing.
I am all right. You don't want to catch the references. That is an Eminem line for those who
yeah. But yeah, it's like it's like people, because I think about, again, like, you know, white people trying to ask us stuff. Like, I'm like, if you're coming from a general place, if you want this knowledge and you want to know some stuff, that's fine. You don't have to agree with me on every single point for me to think like ultimately you're trying to be an ally. So if I don't agree with you on the part of you're now a full-on female because you're saying you're a trans female, that doesn't take away from like, I still want to advocate for you. I still want to be in your corner. It just means that I'm not going to, based on these various logical things that are set in place that I've learned up to this point. And if you can discuss me out of that logic, then that's a different story altogether also. But for right now, I'm learning X and Y chromosomes. I'm learning how the male body is from the female body. These things are going to be still in my mind when I'm looking at you and saying that you want to be just considered as the full female. I'm not going to do that, but I'm still going to think you have the rights. I'm still think you're a good person. I'm going to think that, you know, if you're having some kind of struggle, I want to be helpful.
And I'm like, to be fair to people on the other side, if you're the person who wants to ask the questions, you got to do it from an open-minded perspective. You got to come into it like, okay, I'm going to accept this for what it is, but I'm coming from a place of I want to be more accepting, and that comes from understanding. So help me understand some things. And I feel like that would lead to a better conversation versus a lot of times people just come in with a judgmental mindset, or they come in with their own offense because whatever their assumptions about their family are now shattered. And so now they're like coming in with, wait a minute, so does this mean and that? And then it comes off more judging. And once again, the enemy to all of this is judgment. The reason I feel like we're in all of these conversations and having all of these legal battles right now is because of the judgmental nature of society. I think that's the root of the problem. So if we can let go of judging people's choices for how they want to live their lives and how they pursue their happiness, I think we'll have to spend a lot less time in court.
Yeah, because that costs money. It ain't worth it in the long run. Like, this is not.
So that's where I'm like, look, if this person decides that they want to live as the opposite gender or as no gender, and they find somebody who's cool with that, and that happens to be your, you know, brother, sister, cousin, kid, okay, that's what it is. So, you know, figure it out. But keep whatever relationship you have. And if they're not with somebody who's your brother, sister, cousin, kid, why do you care? Like, shut up. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it doesn't affect you directly, then shut up. Like, stop trying to sway people to what you think is how they should live their life.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Very true. Well, this has been quite the long conversation, but definitely a very interesting one. We've been talking about this, doing this show for a minute, so we definitely had a lot of stuff picked up, ready to go. So great talk as always, Joe Hollywood. And
I just want to say, because like we saw the video where the one person was like, and if you don't agree with me, then F you, this and that. I just want to say, if you don't agree with what we had to say right here, right now, then I mean, talk to us about it. I feel like there's ways we can come to a peaceful resolution.
Yeah, leave a comment down below. Write us, let us know what you're thinking and what you're feeling. Hey, if we said anything in this broadcast that you agree with, that you disagree with, that you want to give us some clarifications on, you want to curse out, we don't care. Just leave a comment. It is what it is. We respect your opinion, hopefully in the same way that you respect ours. And we're always on this thing saying what our opinions are based on where we are in our lives. We're always also constantly learning and constantly growing. So, we're always open to any kind of conversation in any kind of realm, particularly in these kind of issues where, again, we are not trans people. So maybe they have different perspectives that we could be less ignorant about and know more stuff on. And we're always open to hear those things.
And once again, if you are offended by the fact that there are two men sitting here who are talking about issues that you don't think we should have a right to talk about, I want to say once again, how dare you assume our gender? Jerks.
Ass. All right, we'll see y'all next time. Peace.